Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Granbury will now come to order at 6 p.m. on Monday, June the 13th, 2022 in the Granbury City Hall City Council Chambers. Planning and Zoning will go into executive session. All members noted that all members are present, and the time is 6 o'clock. Okay, no action was taken in executive session, so we are back into our normal agenda and with all members present. The first thing on the agenda tonight is public comments on agenda items that are non-public hearing agenda items. Speakers will have a limit of 2 minutes allocated at this time for comments regarding agenda items that are not listed as public hearing. In that case, on this agenda item would only be item E1 on tonight's agenda, or C. Public hearing comments will be recognized when the public hearing is open for each public hearing agenda item. If you wish to speak on any non-public hearing agenda items, please complete a speaker card, which is right up here, and turn them in to Bridget. She's in the red over here to my left, and return it to her at this, well, you can turn it. Right now, I don't have any, I don't believe any. Did anybody intend to speak on E1? That's our only non-public hearing item. The rest will all be handled as we go through each individual ones. The first item, then we'll move to C, the consent agenda, approval of the minutes from the May 9th, 2022 regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Do I have any changes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Moore and a second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The first item that takes us down to the next item is D1, request of John Craddock to add to the Craddock name to the Stringfellow Gilmartin House, HL 26. The new name would be the Stringfellow Craddock Gilmartin House. The property is addressed at 322 West Bridge Street. Kira?
I'll remember to turn my mic on. Let me know if you cannot hear me. This slide is showing a map. Outlined in blue is the site of the Stringfellow Gilmartin House. The site was constructed around 1904. The next several slides show the progeny of the Craddock. Thomas Buckner Craddock purchased the house in 1940 from Stringfellow. So Craddock was in the middle between the two that currently are on the name of the house, and the request is, as stated, to add the Craddock name to the house. There are a series of slides here that prove certain facts of how Mr. Craddock had stature in the community, serving on the city council, living here, working for the railroad, and other professions. He also served on the Parks Board. So I'll just run through those. If you see something you're more interested in, you can let me know to stay on that slide. It's quite a bit of reading, but it shows also here we have the application, but all that is intended to show and document the fact that Mr. Craddock was of substance to the community and warrants addition to the name of the home. Notice was provided and published as required by law. This slide shows the designation of historic landmarks, the applicable zoning ordinance process. When designating a landmark, there are basically 3 steps that need to be taken. Historic Preservation Commission, which has been already held last week, they recommended approval. Then Plan Commission, that's tonight, and the next step would be City Council. There are also criteria in which need to be reviewed to confirm whether or not a site is warranted for said landmark designation. Of that, possessing historic architecture, archaeology, and culture, is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to broad patterns of local, regional, state, or national history, is associated with lives of persons significant to our past, embodies distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, represents the work of a master designer, builder, or craftsman, and represents the established and familiar visual feature of the city. So those are the criteria on which the home was designated as a landmark. This action is to add a name to the name of the landmark, and we have the documentation that it's warranted. So the recommendation is for approval of the landmark name change from the Stringfellow Gilmartin House to Stringfellow Craddock Gilmartin House. The HL stands for Historic Landmark, and it is number 26. Your voting options include recommend approval with conditions, recommend denial, or continue the item if more information is needed. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing, and I assume you're the applicant, or would you go right ahead?
Linda, my mother is Linda Jordan, the new owner of the property. My name is Angela Parker. We just purchased the property. I didn't understand. I've had COVID for 2 weeks, and I didn't understand during the process what Mr. Craddock was asking, which is no problem. We're not necessarily unopposed to it. We just need to understand it. I just first, when I came in here today, understood that this was going to be named. I thought what I was signing was to put my mother as the new owner of a historical home. So on her behalf, I didn't understand what I was signing. So what I'd ask is that we just continue the item until I can understand and see the documentation from Mr. Craddock. And we're not unopposed to it, and that's what I told him. I didn't understand what I was signing at the point.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Craddock.
Thank you, Mrs. Parker, for your. You recently acquired the property, or your
We
family.
did. We recently acquired the property. It's my mother, Linda Jordan, who's in presence.
Right.
It's a trust, a living trust, but the purpose is that we're going to either use it as her primary residence or as an Airbnb. I thought that we were making sure that it was a historical property and that she was now associated as the owner of such. I didn't understand we were adding a new name to it. And that's not that we're opposed to it. I just didn't understand that. So I need to please ask for a continuation until next month so I can read it, explain it to my mother, and we can come back and either agree.
And also, will there be some burden placed on the current owners as a result of this name change?
I'm sorry, I have a difficult time hearing. Can you please repeat that?
It's really a question of staff.
I'm not aware of any burden that would be placed on a property because of a name change for historic properties. It's already designated as a historic landmark.
Well, I was referring to the signage and
I believe there
things
was
of that nature.
There was something in the package that the Craddock family was willing to pay for that. I believe I read that in.
Well, I just
in
want to
the
be sure that
package.
the current owners aren't burdened because
No, we
when
wouldn't
they
be
bought the
burned,
property,
and we're
it
not
was-
even opposed to that. We just need a few days to look over the information. That's all we're asking.
So just to clarify, you're not the applicant. You're the owner,
My
but not
mother,
the applicant.
Linda Jordan is.
Okay.
I'm her trustee, and I speak on her behalf.
So who
She's
put the
not-
paperwork in?
John
Okay,
Craddock,
right.
but when
So
my
she's-
communication with John back and forth, I thought he was representing the historical committee on making sure my mother's name was put as the new owner. I misconstrued what he told me. And
Okay.
it's probably 100% my fault.
I just identified her as the applicant when it started, but I don't think that is the applicant, right? Mr. Craddock was the applicant.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not opposed to that. I just asked for a personal meeting with him so we could have a conversation next week.
Any questions for the owner's daughter?
No more.
Any questions for staff? Go
I
ahead,
just-
John.
I just make
Tim.
her aware, we don't meet weekly, we meet monthly, which means this puts this vote off for another month and the city council off for another month. So this is a 2-month delay.
That's perfectly fine from our standpoint. Nothing's changing from our standpoint. We thought we were buying the Stringfellow Gilmartin house. So nothing's changing from our standpoint. And I'm sure the family, after this many years, isn't going to be overly taxed and burdened to put it off for 2 more months.
But my understanding is you don't oppose it. My
Not at this
understanding is
time.
you don't
Not at
oppose
this
this.
time, but I literally just came in here, read this, and called Mr. Craddock since I said there was a misunderstanding. And as he can confirm, I had COVID when he was calling me, and I didn't understand. So
Thank you.
it's on me at that point. No, we're not arguing the point. We're just asking, can we please read the information a little thorough?
So is Mr. Craddock's here?
No, he lives
Okay.
on Lake Travis
Okay,
in
I believe-
Lago Vista. I just spoke with him.
Okay.
And
Any-
he agrees with me. He goes, no problem.
Any other? Mr. Erdman?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I need to close the public hearing if there's no other questions for anyone. I would say I close the public hearing. Go ahead, Mr. Erdman.
Motion to approve.
The first option that's up here, I have a motion to recommend approval made by Mr. Erdman. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Mr. Holman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
Wait, we need to know who the nay.
Do a hand vote.
No.
So you've got them? You can see, okay. So we have 4-3 for approval, so motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a public request of storehouse storage to rezone Lot 2, Block 1 of the Storehouse Storage Addition from interim holding IH District to light commercial LC. The property's address is 3706 FM4. Kira?
Thank you. This site is located, that's hard to see on your screen, but it is outlined in blue. If you're familiar with this area, it is just to the south of the Kroger building, kind of in that notch of that flag red colored lot on the right side of the FM4. Thank you. I'll speak up louder. Thank you. The site is 0.97 acres and is currently zoned interim holding. And the proposal is for light commercial. There is no site plan for this property. It is a standard or straight zoning. The future land use map is retail office, so the light commercial is aligned with the future land use map. This is the narrative that talks about the retail office, and it describes what retail office is. Basically, the title of the land use tells you it's for retail stores or office uses. Site map or site photo, the application, standard zone change. Public notice on June 2nd. We mailed out 6 public notices to property owners within 200 feet of the property, and we also published in the Hood County News on May 28th. We've received neither letters in favor nor letters in opposed to the request. Suggested action is to approve the change of zoning request, and here are your voting options. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing, and is the applicant here? I see. Are you representing the applicant? Are you the applicant?
I am the representative.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
My name is Braden Horton. I represent Storehouse Storage Granbury. We are seeking a rezone from the interim holding classification to the light commercial classification. Reason for this being we're looking to construct a multi-tenant sign on the retail lot, one panel being allocated for the storage lot directly behind it, and one panel being allocated for the future retail development right there on Highway 4.
Any questions for the applicant? Any questions for staff? And I'll close the public hearing. Thank you, sir, and entertain a motion on the rezoning request, please.
Chair, I'll move for approval.
We have a motion to approve the rezoning request as presented by Mr. Hafes. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Moore. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda is D3. Consider a request of Snickwa. Is that how you say it? Snickwa? Snickwah LP to rezone a 24.949 acre tract of the John Chenoweth Survey, abstract number 108, from interim holding IH to planned development / single family residential 7,000 PDR7. The property is located west of Weatherford Highway and north of Hunter Park. Kira?
Right. So again, this is the site location map. The site is outlined in blue on the map. It's just south of that purple and north of purple. On this map, the purple indicates PD for residential R7. And this request is a request very much like what's been built there, a request for PD R7. This shows the PD exhibit in green. It's a little bit hard to see, but the streets would connect through to the north and the south and then form a bit of a loop drive with connections north and south on both ends, actually. The reason for the PD, Planned Development District R7, is for side setbacks for a combination total 15 feet, minimum 5 foot one side. That's your standard R7, I apologize. The request itself is for R7 planned development with side setbacks of 5 feet on both sides. This would be uniform to that development to the north and development to the west of this site. And the PD is uniform with all other zoning ordinance requirements. This is your future land use map. Low-density residential is planned, and the zoning fits that low-density residential land use district. This is the narrative for low-density residential. Down at the bottom, you'll see that 7,000 square foot minimum lot size, which is your R7 zoning district. Photograph of the site. It's not yet developed. This slide is intended to show that the applicant is required and is planning to build a masonry wall along the highway, the Highway 51 there, or Weatherford Highway. And that note is as a rock wall, so it's a form of masonry wall. Okay. The application. Public notice was sent to 29 property owners within 200 feet of the property, and it was also placed in the Hood County News on May 28th, and no input has received either in support or in opposition to the request. Staff recommends approval. And these are your voting options. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. And is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak?
Good evening. Chad Wallace with Baird, Hampton and Brown Engineering, representing the applicant. This is just a continuation of Abe's Landing, the next phase, similar to what's out there. The PD is in place for the previous phases, and we ask that it remains in place for this phase. We are building the masonry wall along the highway, and everything else is the exact same with the previous phases of Abe's Landing.
Any questions for the applicant? Any questions for staff? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the rezoning request, please.
Chair, I'll move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Hafe to approve the rezoning request as presented by staff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Urban. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is D4, consider the request of Happy Hound LLC for the operation of a kennel with outside pens in a heavy commercial 8C zoning district. The property's address is 1851, 1863, and 1865 Acton Highway. Kira?
Thank you. So again, this is your location map. The site is outlined in blue there on the southwest corner of Acton Highway and Cox Road. The site is a little over 3 acres in area and is zoned heavy commercial. The purpose is for an outdoor kennel. I'm going to go back. I'd like to give you an idea of the surrounding uses just a little bit on this slide. There to the east on Acton Highway sits a residential care facility, and then you see the site to the south and all all the other surrounding properties to the north, south, and west are a combination of either commercial or some type of heavy commercial or even heavier uses. This is the site plan. This is an existing facility for veterinary use. The parking and a large building are located towards the street, and then other buildings are towards the back of the property. The kennel that is proposed, let's see, let me try this, is right here. See that little yellow X?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a long rectangular building right there. And attached to that building are the outdoor pen for each stall, if you will. It's a little bit like a horse barn, right? So that's where the proposed outdoor kennel would be located. The zoning HC requires a specific use provision or permit, for outdoor pens. And that was in 2007 is when they received approval for that particular one. In 2008, they received a renewal for 3 years, and in 2018 for 10 years for the existing uses on the site. A veterinary and dog kennel, a pet resort, daycare is what it's commonly known as, that facility right there. So this request would allow them to add that one building with the kennel facility. There are supplemental standards for this use, site plan, which you've just seen. Outdoor lighting being directed away from residential uses. Pens, outdoor kennels, or animal runs located 150 feet from residentially zoned or used property. Now, the assisted facility that's across the street there to the east is allowed in commercial districts. So sometimes we debate, is that a commercial use or is that a residential use? So just to bring that to your attention, that the use is sometimes debated. And this shows the surrounding uses in that table. We sent 12 public notices to property owners within 200 feet, and that was on June 2nd. And then we published in the newspaper on May 28th the item. And we have actually today, we received one letter in opposition and nothing in favor of the proposal. The suggested action is to approve the SUP with the conditions previously imposed, except the 10-year term, and recommend conditions include outdoor activity to be screened with a stockade screening fence along any adjoining property line or right-of-way. No overnight or outdoor boarding will take place, and the property shall be used as generally depicted in the site plan, which will be Exhibit A on your ordinance. And these are your voting options. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing, and is the applicant here? And if so, would you like to speak?
Hi, my name is Sarah Spinelli. I'm representing the owner. We've been around for over 20 years, and we're just looking to meet our client demands. Right now we have 4 indoor-outdoor kennels, so we're just looking to add more indoor-outdoor kennels to meet those needs, and that would just be day use, though. There would be no overnight outdoor boarding.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Grace?
Yes, I'm a little confused by this indoor-outdoor interpretation. One of the lines says specifically that there'll be no overnight outdoor boarding,
Yeah.
which means that the dogs will all be indoors?
Yeah, so the pens are divided with a dog door, so they can be opened up so the dogs can go into a contained outdoor area during the day, and then they would be closed off and be completely indoors
So they return
overnight.
to an enclosed area at night, so
Yeah.
there wouldn't be in effect any barking dogs at night?
Correct, yeah.
Out
It would,
in the...
right, it would
in-
operate
in
the same
runs.
as we're currently operating.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant? Any questions for staff? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this SUP request, please.
I motion to approve.
Motion to,
Want the conditions?
I'm sorry, with conditions, right?
have the motion to approve with the conditions by Mr. Grace. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Hallman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is D5. Consider request of Mary Nolte for a specific use permit to operate a 2-guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed as 218 North Hannaford Street. Kira?
So the site is there on the east side of Hannaford Street and is about 0.258 acres in size, zoned R8.4. And again, the proposal is for a 2-guest suite, unhosted bed and breakfast. This is the site plan. The house was recently renovated, and there is a fence around the entire back and portions of the side yard. Parking would be located in the front of the site along the loop driveway. And the plan also shows a parking space. If you see those blue lines on the plan, there's a parking space that the concrete points to, and there's light lettering that states parking. In our ordinance, parking cannot be blocked or be tandem, so the applicant would need to decide whether or not they want the parking on the loop drive, which is not blocked because you can exit from that driveway in any case, or if they want to use that parking space where the blue lines are, then they would have to modify that and also put paving in. Paving's required for parking. And there's a condition to that suggested for you to consider. Okay, this is a recent photograph of the site. And we've been providing the 600-foot distance. That line that is on that map is a little bit difficult to see. I apologize. We'll try to do better. In any case, you can see there in the pink boxes, those are existing approved B&B uses within 600 feet of the site. The site is within proximity to the downtown square. Let's see if there's anything that I've missed here. There's no record of previous or existing SUP for a B&B on this site. I covered the parking. On June 2nd, we mailed out 16 public notices and also published on May 28th the notice in the Hood County News. We've received no input either in favor nor in opposition. We've included in all of our slides the statements from our staff report, so I know our agenda is very long. For most of these items, I'm not going to read these for you. I will incorporate for the record the staff report on each item. I think that'll help our hearing to move along. But if you do have any questions, I certainly want to be attentive to those. So this just gives the guidance on recommending for a specific use permit. They may be approved, the bed and breakfast in a residential district through a SUP, which is requested. The application does appear to meet the supplemental land use standards, and the applicant does need to demonstrate on record a plan to mitigate potential nuisances on adjoining property. That is, what is the property maintenance plan and/or providing emergency contacts. If this can be illustrated, city staff would recommend approval with the following conditions. Oops, looks like I duplicated something. Maybe not. I just repeated a sentence. So, first one is subject to periodic inspections and the city's fee schedule. Violation of the terms and conditions stipulated in the SUP may be a violation of the zoning ordinance, and the SUP may become null and void, and or the certificate of occupancy may be revoked. And then we have a condition regarding the parking and maneuvering need to be hard surface, the driveway to be extended and connect to the parking space as mentioned earlier. And this, finally, the specific use permit shall automatically expire 1 year from the date of the city council approval. And that is because the upcoming revision to the code, and we want to assure that performance of all of the bed and breakfasts in the community are per our standards. And these are your voting options. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here? If so, would you like to speak?
Hi, I'm Mary Nolte.
You can
Sorry,
bring,
this is
you,
kinda
it'll,
tall.
it'll lean down.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
We do plan to put a hard surface driveway, the circle drive, and the parking going to the side of the house if we're approved as an Airbnb. Were there any other questions or concerns? I don't remember. We have had one inspection. We're willing to have any others that we need to have.
I think they needed you to speak to the maintenance of the property, who is going to do it if you're doing
We're
it, and
going
an
to do
emergency
that.
contact, or someone
We're going to
locally.
do that. What do you mean by an emergency contact?
Someone, if that, maybe explain this better. Maybe the noise level gets too high and someone calls in, a neighbor calls in the police department, someone that has to be can be contacted in this locally.
Oh, okay.
Do
yeah.
you have
We're
someone that you're
on
planning
doing all
on-
that ourselves? Yeah, we live in town, so.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Moore?
Yes, ma'am. Are you going to stipulate how many people are staying in this two-bedroom? Will there be a maximum?
Yes, there'll be a maximum of 2 people. I think. Well, actually, I think it says maybe 2 to 3.
2 to 3 per bedroom?
No, 2 to
For the
3
house.
total. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you. Appreciate it. We have one speaker card tonight on this agenda item, and it's Amy Dwight.
Hi, my name is Amy Dwight. I live at 405 Counts Alley. I'd like to speak not specifically to this, but to the fact that there are 6 brand-new SUPs on the agenda tonight, and then the very last agenda item is the proposed new ordinance. So as somebody who finds this to be a very hot-button topic, I'm just asking that we continue all 6 of them. Let's get the new ordinance in place, and then consider new applications. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions for staff or the applicant anymore? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the SUP request.
Go ahead, Richard.
Chair, I'll move for approval with the recommended conditions.
And would you put those back up for us, Kira? Would you mind? Okay, so those are the 3 listed conditions that Mr. Hafis has a recommendation for approval with the 3 listed conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hallman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is D6. Consider request of Oscar Delgado for a 1-guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed as 422 West Doyle. Kira, sorry.
That's all right, thank you. Here's your location map. The site is outlined in blue. The property is about 0.3 acres, zoned to R7, and the purpose is a 1-guest suite, unhosted bed and breakfast. This slide shows the site plan. The site is improved with an existing residence and a accessory dwelling unit, that north building, or farthest, this one, is the accessory dwelling unit. That's not allowed as currently, specifically currently is not allowed to have a bed and breakfast in it, although the main primary building, this one, is allowed. So that's where the bed and breakfast would need to be located. The bed and breakfast is required to have 2 parking spaces, and the Historic Preservation on May 26th approved the use of crushed granite surface for 2 parking spaces. As I mentioned earlier, parking is required to be hard surfaced. However, in an historic district, the Historic Preservation Commission can approve crushed granite or an alternative material. So that's approved here. This up here is concrete. Okay. These are photographs of the existing site. The area of the new parking is in the lower right photograph. You can see that that's not improved with any kind of hard surface at this time. And again, I apologize for these maps. It's very hard to see that circle, but this shows the B&Bs within 600 feet of the subject property. The subject property is in blue, and the other B&Bs are in that pink color. Adjacent to the property to the east is a B&B, and across the street to the south is another. Those were approved both in September of 2021. There are no records of previous or existing SUP approvals for B&Bs on this site. And I already covered the building. On June 2nd, we mailed out 23 notices to property owners. It was also advertised in the newspaper on May 28th. We've received no letters in favor or in opposition to the request. Again, incorporating for the record the content of the staff report. So this is just reviewing section 11.1A, standards and criteria for deciding an SUP. And the application does appear to meet the supplemental land use standards stipulated, providing off-street parking, and will be subject to life safety inspections prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The applicant does need to demonstrate a plan to mitigate the potential nuisances to adjoining property. That is, what is the property maintenance plan and/or providing emergency contacts? If that can be illustrated, then staff would recommend approval with these conditions: additional parking being installed as shown on the plan for 2 vehicles. The SUP would be subject to periodic inspections and an inspection fee established by the city's master fee schedule. Any violation of the supplemental land use standards or terms and conditions stipulated in the SUP may be deemed in violation of the zoning ordinance, and the SUP may become null and void, and/or the certificate of occupancy may be revoked. And finally, the specific use permit shall automatically expire 1 year from the date of City Council approval. These are your voting options. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I open the public hearing. Is the applicant here?
Good evening. I'm Oscar Delgado. I'm the applicant owner. I'll have all the emergency contact people that you will need. We'll have a stipulation. We don't like loud noise anyway, so we're not going to have any of that. There's only going to be maybe 2 people maximum only. The crushed granite, as the Historical Commission approved, will be put down. Other than that, if you have any other questions.
Questions for the applicant? Mr. Watson?
Yes, sir. Is it my understanding, is it correct, is the property currently for sale?
Yes.
But is a contract pending soon, or how would that affect, why would you be asking for this now if you're looking to sell it, I guess is my question.
Well, because if it doesn't sell, then we have to find an alternative plan to stay in Granbury. So that is why I'm applying for the special use permit. Right now, the house, we don't have any contracts. It doesn't look like it's going to sell anytime soon. So we'll be staying.
So this is your backup plan?
Yes.
So to say? Okay, thank you.
So do you live in the property right now, Mr. Delgado?
Yes.
Okay.
Question for staff.
Kira?
Did I understand you correctly that the Historical Society has the ability to waive city ordinances?
The Historic Preservation Commission,
It can waive city ordinances.
they can approve standards, as this example, for crushed granite for parking rather than a hard surface parking.
Even
Yes.
though the ordinance requires that?
Yeah.
That's
They're
correct.
waiving the ordinance.
That's correct. It is part of the zoning ordinance in the Historic Preservation HPO district and
So that's an
HCO
interesting
districts.
conflict. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, I have a question for staff.
Go ahead, Mr. Ardman.
If in fact his house sells before, what happens does the new owner have to reapply, or what happens?
So with a SUP, the SUP transfers with the land. So it would transfer to the new property owner. It's part of the land.
So what if the new property owner doesn't give you an emergency number, doesn't comply with the rules and regs? I mean, can we not just pull that permit?
So if the new property owner operates the bed and breakfast, they would have to comply with all the standards and regulations of the zoning ordinance and the approved SUP. If they're out of compliance, there would be a penalty possible through code compliance up to and including revocation of the SUP.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. We have one speaker card. That's off, Mr. DeGaulle. Did you need to ask staff anything?
No.
Okay, you're good. All right, we have one speaker card, Mr. Wayne Mills.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Mills. I live at 629 East Bridge Street. I've never fully understood what a guest suite was, but when I looked at this property, I saw that it was listed as a 5-bedroom residence. Now, I understand from looking at what was presented this evening that there are 2 separate structures here. Do we have different bedrooms in different ones? I mean, a 5-bedroom is even going to be outside of the number of bedrooms going to be underneath the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance. So I'm just real confused on what we're talking about when we're talking about bedrooms versus this guest suite. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, Mr. Delgado, could you come back up? We have another question for you, please.
It's ironic he brought that up because I was up here thinking the same thing. I pulled up your home on Realtor.com and was wondering why it was a 1-bedroom unhosted when you have 5 bedrooms in the one house. So could you explain what rationale there?
Yes, that's correct. There's 3 bedrooms upstairs. There's 2 bedrooms downstairs. 1 bedroom downstairs will be blocked off, and then they'll have access to the downstairs bedroom and the kitchen and the living room area. The upstairs will be blocked off.
So do you intend to be there when you have guests? It's unhosted application.
Yes, we'll be living in the apartment next door,
And
which
the-
is on the same property.
Okay. Is that still the unhosted definition, Kira?
So this is a little convoluted. The building that is the accessory, I'm going to go back to the slide with that building on it here. There we go. So this building is considered an accessory dwelling unit. This is a non-conforming building. It was put in place prior to the adoption of the 2001 zoning ordinance. And that building as an accessory dwelling unit cannot be used as a bed and breakfast. It is accessory to the primary building. Okay. We just heard the applicant say that the home is for sale, correct? Correct. Thank you. So it is unknown where or if the owner would be on property. What we also heard was this is proposed as a 1-guest suite, unhosted bed and breakfast, and that activity, the bed and breakfast, there you go, would be housed in the house, correct? Mr. Delgado?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, sir. And that is allowed as an unhosted bed and breakfast. What you may consider is conditions based on any of the information that's been presented to you. if you feel that is warranted.
Well, one comment I have is that any of these SUPs we have could turn around the next day and put it on the market. So that's nothing that we really as a commission control. He's just stating up front that it's for sale now, but anyone could, the first applicant could put their house on the market tomorrow. So, and the SUP is still with the house unless there's something that's not in compliance, at least for 1 year, because we put the 1 year was on there. So I just wanted to kind of make that statement because it just so happened that he has disclosed that it's on the market. But it's fine for them to occupy the garage on an unhosted. Is that where you're going to live, you said, when someone's renting the house? You'll be in the garage?
Yes.
Okay. On the premises. So we're okay with the app the way it stands, Kira?
Thank you for asking that again. It occurs to me.
Again, sorry.
The zoning ordinance has a little detail involved in it.
It is a yes then?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the accessory dwelling unit does have a statement there that let me look this up. I want to get it right.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Mr. Delgado a question.
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused. You've applied for a one-bedroom unhosted, yet you have 2 bedrooms downstairs. I understand how you can block off the 3 upstairs, but I just don't understand why you didn't apply for a 2-bedroom at least.
Well, because the parking issue, we can't park cars in front of the house. That was one of the things we were gonna try to do, but because of the way the parking would be situated, all the cars would have to park in front of the house. The city did not, said there's an ordinance against parking up in front of the house in the lawn area and creating a parking spot there. So we had to lower it down to just 1 so I could be able to get that 1 car in there.
Okay, and how do you plan on blocking that other bedroom off and the upstairs?
It has a door. All the bedrooms have doors. It'll be locked. And that 1 bedroom that will be blocked has a separate entrance where I can lock the door from the inside.
Okay,
And they won't have any access to that room.
But they'll still have access to the kitchen and the living area, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. I think you've been very upfront with what you plan to do and appreciate that.
So, Ms.
Go
Chair.
ahead, Ms. Kira.
Thank you, Ms. Cave. So thank you for the moment to get the proper information. In section 1110A, accessory dwelling units, the introductory paragraph states that the accessory dwelling unit is allowed and it must be used by a person or persons related to the occupants of the main dwelling unit. And then there are a number of standards, 6 standards that are also applicable. If you'd like me to go through those, I can.
It sounds like we're good. I think he's related to his wife. Okay. So any other questions? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the SUP request as presented. Or would you put the options back up, would you mind, Kira, just so everybody can know the conditions?
Make a motion for approval with conditions.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Hallman for approval of the SUP request with the conditions.
I second.
A second by Mr. Grace. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next agenda item is D7. Consider request of James D. Hall for 1 guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed as 407 West Torrey. Kira?
Okay, thank you. So this is your location map there on Torrey. The site is outlined in blue. It is 0.15 acres in size and zoned R-10. Request is for a 1 guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. This is the site plan. It's an existing single-family residence with a driveway along Baker Street. That driveway accommodates parking for 2 vehicles, which is required. This shows both sides of the house facing onto Torrey and Baker. Again, your location map with surrounding approved bed and breakfast uses within 600 feet of the site. So those are shown in pink. And there are no records of previous SUP approval for this site. On June 2nd, staff mailed out 17 notices to property owners and also published on May 28th notice in the newspaper. We've received no input from favor or opposition of anyone. This is incorporated for the record. The staff report, section 11.1a. Again, this is the first SUP for this particular site. The application appears to meet the supplemental land use standards stipulated for providing off-street parking. It will be subject to life safety inspections prior to issuance of a CO. The applicant does need to demonstrate on record a plan to mitigate potential nuisances to adjoining property. That is, what is the property maintenance plan, and/or providing emergency contacts. If this can be illustrated, then staff would recommend approval with these conditions. The first one, our standard SUP condition, subject to the fee schedule. Any violations would result in potential revocation, may be deemed a violation, that standard condition. And number 2, the specific use permit shall automatically expire 1 year from the date of City Council approval. These are your voting options. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kira. Is the applicant here? Would you like to speak, sir?
Well, my name's James Hall, and I guess I mostly wanted to try to answer your questions. I do have an emergency contact, actually a coworker and friend, and I listed his information on the application. Any other questions for me?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Erdman.
What's your name again?
James Hall.
Who is the Miss Stinson?
Miss who?
Am I on the right one?
That's the next one.
Forget it. Forget it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I was about to think I had a wife I didn't know about. So.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Your secret's good.
Can you speak to how you are going to maintain the property? Will you be keeping the yard up yourself, or are you using a management company?
Actually, one of my staff members' husband does the maintenance on the yard, so
Okay.
he's doing it currently and will continue to do that.
Okay. Any other questions for staff or for the applicant?
I'll do.
Mr. Moore?
I'm showing this house to be a 3-bedroom. You've applied for a one guest suite.
Yes.
Is there a reason for that?
I like to keep things simple. I really don't want to mix people with, strangers within one roof. I've lived in B&Bs that way, and there were no problems. You had your own room, your own key. But for me, I like to keep it simple. And to me, it's simplest to have one guest at a time.
Okay, but it's showing unhosted.
Yes, I don't live, that's not my primary.
Oh, you're just saying you just want one guest there at a time?
Yes.
Okay, so you will not be renting the other 2 bedrooms out?
The whole house is what I'm proposing as
okay.
a suite.
Oh, just one guest. Okay, I misread that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Do you have a maximum that you intend to be able to put on how many would stay there?
There's 3 bedrooms and 5 beds, so at this point, that's my intent, is to have 5 max. There's
Have
5 max.
or
There's
5
5 beds.
5 people max?
Yes. Sorry?
Go ahead, Mr. Grace.
Question for staff. Parking requirements?
Right. So the parking request or requirements for an unhosted 1 guest suite is 2 parking spaces minimum.
I understand that, but he's telling us that he's going to use 3 bedrooms.
Right, I know. And that's one reason for our proposed code amendment, is that the existing code is in some ways very confusing. And it is not clear although our policy has been consistent. When a request is for a one-guest suite, the requirement is for 2 parking spaces only.
Will your guests have access to the garage or just the paid parking in front of the garage?
The paved parking, but once a person is inside, you can actually walk right into the garage, so. It can be locked, but I don't have a lock at this point from the garage going into the kitchen, if that's your question.
So we have a house, basically, that's going to be rented, 3 bedrooms and 5 people max, as stated by the applicant, just to make it all clear. Everybody's probably clear on that
May I
anyway.
just say this?
Yeah, sure.
What I envision is a family staying in the house over a weekend. And just in my mind, 2 parking spaces would be plenty, and the house is plenty adequate space-wise, and 2.5 bathrooms.
And it does meet our current ordinance requirements. Any other questions for the applicant? Or Kira, staff? Not, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay, if not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a, I'm sorry? Okay, I'll move you up just 1 second, sir, and I'll try to find it, okay? I'm good. Can you come to the speaker? I'll go ahead and move you up. You're to...
I'm Lou James. I live at 407 Council Alley. You can't have a 3-bedroom unhosted residential. You can only have 2. Mr. Huawei, would you look it up, please? 2 bedrooms is the maximum. I've looked it up.
Yeah, but it's not gonna be a law yet.
That's true.
So these.
That's true.
Thank you, sir. That is correct in the definition. It states a dwelling unit that is used for transient lodging with no more than 2 bedrooms. So the speaker is correct.
I have a
Thank you,
question.
Mr. Jens.
Since a 3rd bedroom can be locked off, would that make it acceptable?
Kira, I would think that that's,
Well, we voted on the other one.
yeah,
Allow the other guy to do it.
right.
I would suggest that you would need to provide some conditions if that is something you're interested in.
I think this is the applicant has to state, that, like they said, the prior one had more bedrooms than that, but they stated that they were going to be locked off and they were only going to rent 1. So are we asking the applicant to state that he would lock off 1 of the bedrooms and only rent 2 to comply with the ordinance?
That would be fair.
Sir, are you willing to state that?
Sure.
Go ahead. You'll only be
state-
renting X number of bedrooms.
If I need to lock a bedroom with guests there, I'm willing to do that and have only 2 bedrooms accessible. I struggle to understand the rationale behind it, but the regulations are what they are.
The regulations are what they are right now, sir. If there is things on our agenda tonight but they won't be, we're just a recommended body that we recommend to city council.
Sure.
So it still has to pass city council before it could be passed and become enacted into the ordinance. So tonight, we're dealing with what we have on the books.
Sure. I have one other question. So
Sure.
if I am approved and it expires in 1 year, what's the process? You have to reapply, or how does that work?
Go ahead, Kira.
Thank you. Sure. Sir, you would have to reapply, and you would need to reapply before the expiration date in order to maintain your status.
Okay. And is there some notice that would?
No,
come?
it's your responsibility to be aware of the timeframes.
Okay. And inspections I would be notified of inspection dates?
The inspections are through the building inspections office,
Mhm.
and they would control any scheduling.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we have an SUP request before us that the applicant has stated he was going to only allow access or renting to 2 bedrooms, 5 5 people max. Mr. Hall, could you come back up a second? I'm so sorry, but can you explain to us, so your 2 bedrooms, does that affect how you would do your number of max people, please?
That's a little bit hard for me because if it's a family and they share beds and bedrooms, is that your question? For instance, one room is huge and has 2 beds in it.
Okay.
So whether there's 1 person in a bed or 2, I haven't thought that far.
But you're still requesting 5 people maximum?
Yes.
Okay. And 2 bedroom rentals?
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, sir. I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this request, please. And if you'll put the voting options, I think, on this one back up, Kira, since we've been removed for a little bit, please. I mean, not the voting options, the conditions, if there are conditions. Thank you. All right. Motion on the requested SUP. Does anybody have a motion?
Motion to approve with conditions.
The motion to approve with the conditions by Mr. Grace. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Class. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. We have motion carries. We had 6-1. Okay, the next item on the agenda is D8, consider request of Christine Stinson for 1 guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed at 107 West Arnold. Kira?
Thank you. So this site is located on West Arnold. It's about 0.2 acres in size and zoned R7. The request is for 1 guest suite, unhosted bed and breakfast, and it's outlined in the teal or blue color there on your map. Okay, this site plan actually shows the floor plan, and what they've shown in yellow there is where their parking would be. It is 2 parking spaces in size, so it would meet the standards for parking. This is the front photo, so you can see where the parking would be there in the driveway. The house is about a year old. It's new construction. There's no B&Bs located within 600 feet of this property, and no records of previous or existing SUP approval for B&Bs on the subject site. On June 2nd, staff mailed out 19 public notices to all the property owners nearby, and also published in the newspaper on May 28th. And we've received no input either in support or in opposition to the request. So for the record, again, this is section 11.1A, indicating the considerations for the SUP request. There's no performance on this site to base an evaluation. Staff looked at this one with consideration to its location. It's at the northernmost boundary of the historic district and not in close proximity to the square. And you hear us oftentimes speak to the sites for B&Bs being located within proximity of the square or other historic tourist attraction sites. The application is in a residential zone and may be approved through issuance of an SUP with adherence to the supplemental land use standards and if harmonious and compatible to surrounding uses. The property to the immediate south at address 114 West Moore Street was approved in 2008 for a 1 guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. That had a 10-year term. It expired and is no longer existing. The neighborhood along Arnold Street is characterized with entirely single-family dwelling units, no B&Bs, and again, there are none within 600 feet of this property. The bed and breakfast would be the farthest bed and breakfast located north of the historic square with about 3,500 feet, and this is measured direct along streets. Again, not close to tourist activity centers. We did a little analysis to look at, well, how far are the other bed and breakfasts that have been approved. So there's a list of the farthest ones, west, south, and east of the square. And the range is 2,750 feet, 3,230 feet, which is the closest to 3,500, and east of the square at 2,300 feet. Although east of the square, there's the Langdon Center and some other attractions that draw tourists. In 2016, the comprehensive plan identified the downtown area as an opportunity for infill residences and included bed and breakfast sites as appropriate for the area, and specifically the location in the HPO district to Ewell, just to the north side of Ewell. And then the bed and breakfasts that have been approved north of Ewell generally are grouped along North Thorpe Spring Road. So there are some farther north than what the general plan suggests. The application does appear to make the supplemental standards and would be subject to life safety inspections prior to the issuance of a CO. The applicant does need to demonstrate on record a plan to mitigate potential nuisances to adjoining property. That is, what is the property maintenance plan and or providing emergency contacts. If that can be illustrated, then staff would recommend approval with the following conditions. Our standard SUP condition with the master fee schedule and violation statement, and the SUP would automatically expire 1 year from the date of the City Council approval. And these are your voting options. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Christine Stinson and the owner of the property at 107 West Arnold.
Questions for the applicant? Mr. Grace?
Are you a resident of our community?
I am not a resident here. We'll be staying here a few months out of the year.
So
We are newly empty nesters, and so we have one at Cedar Creek. We spend a few months of the year there. We'll be staying here a few months of the year, and we have an apartment that we currently reside in Uptown Dallas.
So have you made arrangements for emergency contact?
Yes, I could have sworn I put it on the application. She's actually
It's
with
on
me
there.
right now. This is my niece. She's my manager.
Okay, you're a resident
Oh, am I a resident? I'm a homeowner.
here in the city?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, once again, we have a 3-bedroom here.
And I'm kind of confused on that as well. Like the gentleman before me, is when I called in and spoke with someone, what I was told was, because I was kind of confused on the one guest suite statement, and they said no, that's considered one house. If you're only renting to one family, then they never mentioned anything about the number of rooms in there. So I think that's kind of a confusing part to probably not only myself, but numerous people. I was never made aware of any limitations to the number of rooms that could be rented out as long as it was one party.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion, Kyra, on that, because I was looking earlier. Every single one that we have tonight is one guest suite, one guest suite, one guest suite, one guest suite.
Yeah, because I seriously asked about it to make sure everything was correct, and I was...
Yes, ma'am. I do have the right person this time.
Yes.
It was your intention to have all 3 rooms occupied?
It absolutely was. I mean, that was what I assumed, and I thought I was going about everything correctly.
Well, like he said, the application's for single. So can you still make that work if you blocked off 2 rooms?
I wouldn't be able to block 2 rooms off. I would be able to block 1 possibly,
Yeah,
but
get down to 2.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
Kyra, what is the legal definition of our one guest suite? Because I'm confused. I'm just a caveman, I guess. I don't understand what's going on here.
Right, respectfully, members of the commission, and this is a confusing ordinance for us to implement.
Yeah.
And it does need to be changed in order for us to have the confidence to implement it correctly. So the definition, correct? The definition of a guest suite is not to be found unless there is none. And so that is a significant point of concern. What we have to do is we have to go to the definitions of
Kara, can I have you speak up if you could, please?
Oh, of
Thank
course.
you. You'll hear better.
We have to go to the definitions of the bed and breakfast to find the number of rooms. So that is where the standard
So it's two.
is.
Two bedrooms.
It is.
2 bedrooms
For a bed
as
and
the
breakfast.
ordinance stands now.
Unhosted and the residential type. Mhm.
Given what the ordinance is now, do you want to proceed with what with your thoughts were, or withdraw your application, or state that
No.
you'll do 2 bedrooms at this time
We
until?
can state that we'll do 2 bedrooms at this time, and we can always turn around one of the locks on one of the bedrooms and do a lock away for that, and we could use that for supplies that need to be, in temperature-controlled areas anyway.
As she stated, this ordinance is in a major flux of change right now, so.
And I appreciate it. When y'all asked him about it, I think it was the first I'd ever heard about it, and we have 2 other properties. We have one in Mexico, we have one I have several friends who own properties in different states as well as here, and I have never heard of that, a 2-bedroom limit. So that's why I was really surprised.
Questions? Applicant, Mr. Watson?
Yes, like the previous gentleman, your anticipation is to rent this out to a family?
Yes, sir.
Thinking 1 bedroom for mom and dad and 1 bedroom for kids, and if you got a boy teenager and a girl teenager?
Absolutely.
That's the intention, right?
Absolutely.
Not to do one family in 1 bedroom, a different family in another
Oh,
bedroom.
no. We got into this industry because we stay at Airbnbs all over. And in actuality, I found a list. I don't even remember exactly where I came across it, but it stated that Granbury was one of the most, it was on the top 10 list of places in the U.S. to have an Airbnb. So I mentioned that to whoever I spoke with in planning and zoning, and they hadn't heard of that. And between that and my realtors kept saying, you really need to look in Granbury. You really need to look down there. And it's such a great little town, and we do love it. I just was surprised at these extra things, and I would never want other people in there with my family, so we always just rent, as a whole.
Will your advertisement state maximum number of people that would stay at your house?
Yes, right now it's stated at 8 because we have 2 queen bunk beds that were built in one room, and then we have a queen and a king. So we could lock off one of those and change it.
So where do you propose 8 people park, even though they're probably joint
If
sharing
they're coming
some cars?
as a family, they would be in 1 to 2 cars generally. And we have the two parking out front.
Wow. Okay. Any other questions for Kira or for the applicant? So we have before us, the application is changing, well, from stated, of thinking it was 3 bedrooms, that she will have 2 bedrooms, 8 people max, and has an emergency contact person local.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, sir. Go
If
ahead.
we're having to go down to 2 bedrooms, obviously I'll have to change the max number of people to 6, because we could still do possibly the king size bedroom and then the queen bunk room.
Okay. So 2, at this time, under the ordinance that we have now, she has 2 rooms, 6 people maximum is what she's stating at our hearing. Mr. Moore?
Yes, let me just ask again, your emergency contact doesn't live in Granbury?
She owns a home here in Granbury, but I also have my cleaning, the lady who does all of our cleaning at the property, she's a resident here in Granbury, so she's always on call. And then our neighbor right across the street, we're really good friends with the neighbors that we've met here so far, and he's always on call at any time as well.
Okay, thank you.
What's the number of parking with the 6?
It's per
With
room.
the 2 rooms with 6 people?
So they,
Is it 2 cars?
it's still two
Okay.
Yeah.
per code.
Should be sufficient, I would think.
All right,
We could
thank
also
you.
add to our stipulations that we have parking for 2 cars only. That's something we can add into our
Yeah,
listing
you
as
probably
well.
need to do that. Because that usually what creates the neighborhood wars is parking between neighbors and all that.
So,
Go ahead,
excuse
Kira.
me, Ms. Chairman. I'd just like to point out that the parking code doesn't allow tandem parking spaces. So in order to add parking on this site, there would need to be hard surfacing. Just to point that out for the applicant in
This
case
is,
they were
it's a
not
2-car
aware.
garage.
It's a 2-car garage,
Yeah.
it looks like.
It's a
Karen.
2-car garage, so you can park side by
Yeah,
side.
so I think she's stating that she would be willing to state in her applicant that she would only restrict her parking to 2 cars.
I
Yes.
misunderstood, thank you.
Okay. So, given that now she's stating it's 2 rooms, 6 people, 6 max people, local contacts for emergencies, and parking for 2 cars only. Do we have that right?
I believe
Okay.
so.
All right, so given that, if there are any other questions? If not, thank you. I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on what has been presented.
I'll do a motion for approval with the conditions set.
I have a motion by Mr. Hallman with the condition set. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Watson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay. No.
Motion carries 5-2. Okay, the next item on the agenda is D9. Consider request of Natalie Self for a 1-guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property's address is 500 Mill Street. Kira?
Thank you. This map shows the site on Mill Street. The zoning is R7, the site is .234 acres. And again, the request is for a 1-guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. This drawing shows the site plan, and there are 2 parking locations. One is the existing driveway on the southwest side of the site, and one is a proposed parking space off of the side street. At that location, there's an existing break in the curbing, although a driveway apron and the parking space would need to be installed. The parking space would also face towards the west, towards residential. The code requires screening of the parking. The intent of that by policy has been implemented to indicate that screening of the parking lights would need to be provided so that they don't spill over into the adjacent residential properties. These are the photographs of the property. The top left shows that existing driveway, and you can kind of see it on the break in the curb. It's about right there. So this again shows the B&B uses within 600 feet of the property. There's a couple that edge into that distance and one to the north that is closer. Staff mailed notifications on June 2nd to property owners and also published on May 28th in the newspaper. We've received no input in favor or in opposition to the request. Again, for the record, we've incorporated the zoning ordinance in our report. This is the first SUP for this particular site. There's no performance history on it. The application may be approved through the issuance of an SUP with adherence to the supplemental land use standards and if harmonious to this and compatible to the surrounding uses. The application does appear to meet those standards and provides off-street parking and would be subject to life safety inspections prior to a certificate of occupancy. The applicant does need to demonstrate record of a plan to mitigate potential nuisance on or to adjoining property. Specifically, what is the property maintenance plan and or providing emergency contacts. If this can be illustrated, then staff would recommend approval with these conditions: the standard SUP condition for the fee schedule, the supplemental standards, and any conditions regarding those with the penalties. The second condition being that parking must be screened from view of abutting residentially zoned property. And finally, the specific use permit shall automatically expire 1 year from the date of City Council approval. And this slide shows your voting options. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here?
Hello. Thank you for having me. So I'm hoping I can answer any questions you might have. So my name is Natalie Self. I am a local real estate agent here in town, so I am licensed to property manage. So in regards to who will be managing it, I will be doing so. I live at 905 West Pearl Street, so I am only about 45 seconds to a minute from the property. As far as an emergency contact, my brother lives next door to me at 911, and my mother, who's also co-owner, is 5 minutes away from the property. So I do have a really strong community of people. In case there was an emergency, I can't do it myself. In regards to maintenance, I will be maintaining the home myself, but I do work full-time, so if my schedule doesn't allow it, I do have a lawn care service that I work with regularly. I have a cleaning service regularly, so all of those will be taken care of. In regards to rules for the property, I don't know if people do know this, but Airbnb and VRBO have implemented the community integrity program. So just for those platforms which this property would be on, if you get banned from one, that includes you as a person or as the house, if you have too many complaints, you get banned from all other platforms, which would be VRBO, and they're trying to expand those. So I do have that in regards to house rules, but I will be having my own in regards to max number of guests, vehicles, no loud noise past a certain hour, and I will have security cameras outside on the exterior because I do want to be able to, even though I'm so close, I want to be able to, watch my property, make sure that there aren't any parties, things like that. I do not want it to happen. I don't want to clean up after it. I just kind of wanted to put on the record, since I know it can be a hot topic, I live across the street from 2 Airbnbs, so I am very well aware of what that's like, and for me, it's been amazing. Just like Mill Street, one of them had long-term renters, very minimal care was done to the property. One of them was a tear-down status, and now they are beautiful 365 days out of the year. I've never had a complaint. They've been doing so for about 2 years. No complaints, no issues. They've been very lovely. But I also wanted to say that Mill Street, yes, Airbnbs in the historic center attract tourists, but that's because of the size of it. It's less than 800 square feet, and the location. I know that there's other people that will benefit from short-term rentals. Being a realtor, I know that closings get delayed all the time. Sometimes people just need a place to stay for a week or two that has a kitchen. A lot of the Airbnbs in the area are very, very expensive. Most families don't want to spend $250, $300 a night, and I don't think this 800 square foot home, I'm going to be I know I'm not going to be charging that amount. Nobody's going to want to pay for that. They also don't really want to rent a home on the lake. They just want a place to stay for the interim while you're trying to finish closing on your home. Also, Glenrose, I know, has, from going based off the Airbnbs across from me, Glenrose has also had their power plant guys rent for the month or for 3 weeks. So that's kind of the people that I'm trying to attract. My parents, unfortunately, went through a divorce. No places around town fit them financially when they had pets, so my mom had to move in with me temporarily. My dad ended up living in an empty apartment, which was very depressing. So I'm just putting that out there because, yes, I know I will be attracting tourists, but it's still a little bit more than that. It's people that just need help for a small amount of time that may be more than 30 days. So I really do think that this would be good for our community, and I hope you approve it.
Can you tell us, go over the stuff we've been going with others, how many
Yes.
bedrooms and
So there's
people?
2 bedrooms, and it would be max of 6 because I figured if a party, like a party of people, not a party, there would be a couple in 1 bedroom, and or just depending on the layout, I would like to do 2 bunk beds in the master. It's the larger room, but if not, then it would be the 2 bedrooms with 2 beds and then probably a pull-out couch. So if there was a couple with some kids, they can be on the pull-out couch. But I would prefer to keep everybody sleeping in the same, so 2 beds in the bigger bedroom and then one bed in the smaller bedroom.
Questions? Questions for staff? That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll close the public hearing. There are no speaker cards on this item. I'll entertain a motion on the SUP request, please.
Motion approved with conditions.
I have a motion to approve with conditions by Mr. Grace, a second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider a request of Dane and Sally Everett for a 1 guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed as 404 West Dole. Kira?
Thank you. So this map again shows the site outlined in blue. It's on the northwest corner of Doyle and Thrash. It's about 0.128 acres zoned R7, and the proposal again is a 1 guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. This is the site plan of the property. The parking is on the side street, and there's a note here that says it would be paved. So that driveway currently it looks like it's broken up asphalt or maybe broken up concrete, but it would need to be paved so that it's not falling apart dirt. And then the rest of that site plan shows the home. These are the photographs. So the lower photograph on the right there in the shadow shows that parking area in front of the carport. This shows the B&B use within 600 feet of the subject property. You know, I've got the wrong map there, don't I?
Yes,
I
that's Mill
apologize
Street.
for that. What I can say, if my memory serves me correctly, there are a few bed and breakfasts near to this proposed site. Whoops, I apologize, I've done something wrong. Let's disregard what I just said. Sorry about this. There were a lot of reports this time, and I apologize. On June 2nd, staff mailed out 18 public notices to all property owners within 200 feet of the property, and also published on May 28th in the Hood County News. We did not receive any input in either favor or in opposition to the request. For the record, the zoning ordinance has certain requirements for bed and breakfast SUPs. And this is the first request for this site. There's no performance history, therefore. The property is relatively close to this historic square and in a historic overlay district. The request for an SUP is valid and if adheres to the standards and if harmonious and compatible to the surrounding property. The application appears to meet the standards and subject to life safety and COs. The applicant needs to demonstrate also on record a plan to mitigate potential nuisances to adjoining property. That is, what is the property maintenance plan and or providing emergency contacts. If that can be illustrated, then staff would recommend approval with those conditions, that the driveway be approved with a hard surface, and the SUP is subject to periodic inspections, inspection fee per the fee schedule. Any violation of the land use standards or terms and conditions stipulated in the SUP may be a violation of the zoning ordinance, and the SUP may be null and void, or the CO may be revoked. And finally, the specific use permit shall automatically expire 1 year from the date of City Council approval. And these are your voting options.
Thank you, Kira. Is the applicant, or well, let's see, open the public hearing? Is the applicant here?
He is.
All right, he is, all right.
Hi, I'm Dane Everett. My wife Sally and I are putting in the application, maybe to get out ahead of some of the questions. We are local. She and I lived in the house for many years before building a new house last year in Rolling Creek, and so we still live here in Granbury. We love the house. We'll be local. We will be doing the maintenance. We will also be the emergency contacts. It is a 2-bedroom house, and we also, like everybody else here, envisioned the short-term renters being one group with 4 people maximum. And we have been putting in or looking for bids for concrete to make the adjustments to the parking situation. And so, any other questions that I didn't cover?
Questions? Anybody? Nope. Questions for Kira? Questions for applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion on this SUP request, please.
Motion to approve with conditions.
I have a motion by Mr. Erdman to approve with conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Grace. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. That takes us to D11, request of the City of Granbury to amend select sections of the City of Granbury zoning ordinance related to commercial district side building setbacks. Amendments proposed are to section 5.16, heavy commercial. The purpose is to reduce interior side yard setbacks. Kira?
Thank you. So this comes to us as a result of community concerns that lots are limited in their ability to develop, in particular in the heavy commercial district, where lots are somewhat small depending upon the desired result of the development. Where relief of the zoning ordinance standards is not feasible through lot assembly, or perhaps by change of a plan to perhaps a smaller building, or even by variance through the Board of Zoning Adjustment to relieve the existing standards, then properties can sometimes, and do here, remain undeveloped, resulting in stagnated and unsightly properties sometimes, and with limited options for those properties. Staff has examined the potential for setback modifications that are a reasonable approach to support development. Again, the key concern is the heavy commercial district and setbacks for interior side yards. So the front yards would remain the same and the rear yards would remain the same. We have in front of you here a map that shows heavy commercial zoning, this being on the west side of the city. The west side of the city is representing lots that are somewhat larger in comparison to the eastern side of the city. But there are some small ones along the railroad tracks north of the downtown here, and a handful of others. And this slide shows those areas with smaller lots on the east side of the community, primarily fronting or near to frontage of the Highway 377. There's a, let me try this. This might work better. There. So these in here are quite small. So these ones here and a few here. The ones that are along Highway 377 tend to be larger, heavy commercial zone lots. But what we've done some research on comparable cities, and what we found in summary was there's a variation of setbacks, which we would expect that cities have different needs and therefore have differing setbacks. But we have in Granbury side yards of 20 feet. So when you have 20-foot setbacks required on both sides of your property, that can minimize the development potential significantly. Also shown on your slide are Mansfield setbacks, 0 along non-residential use, 20 feet at residential, and a sliding scale setback for buildings with greater height. Fredericksburg with 0 along interior side yards, regardless of adjacency to residential. and Burleson with 0 along commercial development and 10 feet at residential. So what we're proposing is a reduction in the interior side setbacks, and I think everybody knows what we mean by the interior side setback. That's the side lot line that is not adjacent to a street. So it's abutting to another property. So 5-foot setback on each side of the lot, and if 2 or more stories, then a minimum 15-foot setback on each side of the lot. In all cases, the lot development shall be in compliance with all fire and building codes. That's because sometimes fire and building codes warrant a greater setback for safety reasons, and that is where those properties are not abutting residential district. Then 2, maintain the existing minimum 20-foot interior side setback adjacent to a residential district. Reducing, this is probably an out-of-place commentary, but wanted you guys to understand that reducing the setbacks in this amendment doesn't change the parking, landscaping, or fire and building standards. So open space, all those things would still need to be provided. I guess I repeated that one. Sorry about this. So this is just the excerpt that's in your staff report that shows how this would be changed. This diagram just points to the side yard and has a note stating the proposed setback. And then this is the table that is out of the zoning ordinance showing the proposed changes. The anticipated results for this amendment should afford small business development on unimproved lots and reinvestment of already developed lots. Public notice was published in the Hood County News on May 28th. As required, we've received no input on this project, and we're recommending approval. Those are your voting options. Thank you. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. We have one speaker card. Ronnie Hurd.
Ronnie Hurd, 2713 Harborside Drive. I'm in my 3rd term of co-chairman or vice chairman of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And this ordinance we have issues with constantly. We had 2 last month. The problem is the people can't put a building on these narrow lots that she's talking about. You talk about a 75-foot wide lot. You take 40 feet out of it, you got 35 feet. You can't put a building in that you can use in that. That's in new construction. We're still having issues with people that are trying to remodel buildings that were not in this ordinance. They're older buildings that may not have been in the city, and they can't remodel their building because they can't meet the requirement. So I'm just trying to get support for this. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr. Hurt.
My question's for staff
Okay,
specifically.
go ahead, Mr.
Tim
Moore.
Holman, who is on the fire department here. And Tim, how will this affect the fire safety being 5 foot and the next building being 5 foot off, giving you a 10 foot in the middle?
Well, I mean, from a fire standpoint, the greater the distance, the better for your exposure.
Right.
I don't think, and from reading this is not going to override fire code. I mean, according to what Kyra just said. So,
right.
As long as it meets, the fire code itself, then and we're not doing that. So.
Do we specifically know what the code is, the fire code?
Well, I mean, the fire code is this thick. I mean,
right.
there's hundreds of pages probably dedicated to that certain topic right there alone. So it's
Okay.
no cut and dry answer to that.
Okay.
But you're going to have fire suppression being commercial buildings?
It depends on the size of the building.
Right.
So buildings under 5,000 square feet don't require suppression at all
Right.
in a commercial setting.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
For Kira, I'm just curious, how is it that we decided to go from 20 to 5 as opposed to 20 to 15 or 20 to 10?
Right. So what we considered was the minimum distance per the building code that a building should be as a standard. Again, there are some variations when you get into size of building, the fire hose reach. There are many just different variables that we could get into the weeds of. And that's why we included the statement that in all cases, building and fire code standards must be maintained. That's an important safety consideration. A 5-foot wide also allows property maintenance. It allows, people can walk through there to check on the side wall of their building. So just a handful of different reasons.
A lot of subdivisions like that. Abe's Landing, we just approved tonight, wasn't the one we did with Abe's Landing earlier tonight, 5-foot side backs, same as this. And some of those could be 2-story. But this is not going to be able to be 5 foot with 2 stories, so interesting. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the amendments that are being requested to the city ordinances.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Erdman, the amendments that are stated. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Grace. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is D12, request of the City of Granbury to remove local landmark designation from the old Granbury Hospital / Opera House Dormitory, which is historic landmark number 19. The property is addressed as 116 South Houston Street. Okay, that's all it says. So it had the same address again, so I'm not really sure why. That's Kira?
Thank you. Yes, this site is zoned
Oh, it's part of that.
business commercial and historic preservation overlay. The building that's on the site was constructed in 1946. Went too fast. And you can see it there on the map outlined in blue with the pink interior. This is a photograph and documentation of the historic landmark designation number 19. The designation for a historic landmark, it's a local landmark, and it was made on April 13 of 2006. This is a series of photographs and documents of the building. In 2018, Mary Sattarelli conducted background research on the building, and these are images from her findings. So you can see the initial construction to the picture on the left. An addition was made at a later date with that entry covered part. And then on the lower picture to the right, or to the left side, is a addition that is a wing of the old hospital building. The building was most recently used as the Opera House dormitory for housing of visitors, the performers, and others, as I understand. The condition of the property has become in very poor condition, and those who were staying there were in need of evacuation, that the conditions were so poor. So this series of pictures just shows that condition of the property, demonstrating the property is in severe need and has been that way since 2018. Funding apparently has not been sourced to improve the property. This is the applicable zoning ordinance that covers those items for designating historic landmarks. The suggested action is to consider conditions and aspects of the site, including those criteria used to originally designate this historic landmark. In removing a landmark designation from a property, the property goes through the same process as its designation already. Historic Landmark Commission meeting was held last week. They recommended denial of the removal, and now this step is for Plan Commission, and the next step would be for City Council consideration of the removal of the landmark designation. The landmark designation was made in consideration of the criteria for the property, which includes findings regarding the history and progeny of the property. The state report on this property found that the architecture was not significant. Nonetheless, it was designated as a landmark. The state property report also, I think it was in the state report, but I may be mistaken there, but it also found that the architect was not of significant stature, although they were recognized. To its benefit, the hospital was used by many of the people of the community. However, staff is recommending that the landmark designation be removed, and these are your voting options. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I'll open the public hearing. We have speakers for this item, and the first is Kay Kidwell.
Hello. I've lived in Granbury in excess of 63 years, and I'm a concerned citizen. If they do this, if they tear this building down, how many more of the old buildings are going to be torn down? Did you realize that Davy Crockett's great-granddaughter worked at that hospital from the time it was built until 1966 when she retired? I worked there. My mother worked there. My brother was born there. It just makes me sick that they want to get rid of that status, because are they going to do that every time they need a parking lot or something? I know it's not important to a lot of the people who have moved in, but the people who grew up here, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it's important to keep it. I know there's an issue with asbestos, but as long as you don't tear into it, there's no problem. The United States Consumer Product Safety Commission says there's not a serious problem with it. I'm not aware of anyone that has ever been in that building that was ill because of being in it. I feel like it's worthy of keeping. And if nothing else, I think there's enough people that grew up here that would be willing to donate time and money to fix it, to keep it. And that's about all I've got to say.
Thank you, Ms. Kidwell. The next speaker card is Mary Saltarelli.
Good evening. My name is Mary Saltarelli, and I come to you tonight as a historic preservation professional to ask you, to implore you to save Granbury General Hospital. Kira mentioned that I did research on it. What I did was at the city's request, a determination of eligibility to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And it was approved by the Texas Historical Commission. That means that it can be listed, it is deemed as significant by the National Park Service and the Texas Historical Commission. Under the criteria, as Kay was saying, as a medicine and a hospital. The question of the architecture was about, it doesn't have anything to do with the local landmark. It was about their determination not to list it under the criteria of architecture. But they said, it is a great local example of how the architecture of healthcare evolved post-war through the middle of the 20th century. Together with the Doyle Agency next to it, they are great examples of mid-century and post-war architecture. History's a continuum. It doesn't stop. 1940 is considered as historic. 1946 is as historic as 1846. The neighborhood that the hospital is in, the Bluff Street neighborhood, it is, in my opinion, the most historically intact in the city of Granbury, the most historically intact neighborhood. If you go from Houston down to Lambert, where the Hannaford House is, that whole small neighborhood is the most charming historic neighborhood. The zoning has remained the same. There's no bed and breakfast. There's no commercial. It's all residential, and it's all been restored. If the hospital's removed, who knows what will go there? This continued removal of landmarks in Granbury this year is a very slippery slope. The city is the entity that protects historic buildings. Nobody else. The city. And when you removed landmarks or historic districts, it makes all historic properties and districts vulnerable to change, and it endangers the very sense of place that brought us all here to Granbury. I want to read you part of our city's zoning ordinance. The protection, enhancement, and perpetuation of landmarks or districts of historical and cultural significance is necessary for the economic and general welfare of the public. The city received the dormitory in 2006 and immediately designated it as a historic landmark to be protected by the city. Now the city has owned the building for 16 years and has put zero maintenance into it. And now they want to remove the historic landmark that they gave to it. 50 years ago, exactly 50 years ago, we were blessed with far-sighted leaders who established Granbury's first historic district downtown. And they preserved our Victorian authenticity. And since then, we've promoted ourselves as the best historic town square in Texas. And when they did that, I mean, we've promoted ourselves as where Texas history lives. And when they did that, they gave us the gift of the best historic small town in Texas that we've all been so proud of. And since that time, the city has protected all of its historic buildings until this year. So where are we going? Or as Kay said, are we gonna, I mean, if you can lift a landmark, then you can lift a historic district. I mean, this is nuts. You notice in your zoning ordinance, there's a procedure for designating landmarks, but there's not one for removing them. If you remove more landmarks, you risk the city's certified local government status, which I will be glad to explain to you, but it's a source of funding for the city. It's a federal program. You know, those in American cities in the 1960s, people did not recognize Victorian buildings as historic, and so they tore them all down during urban renewal. And now, are we going to not recognize mid-century modern as historic? Because the federal government considers it historic, and so does the state. I'll end. I'm sorry. So, I come to you asking you to be the same type of visionary leaders and preserve our mid-century modern history to help create our future, just as our leaders did 50 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saltarelli. Our next speaker is Mary Haddix.
Good evening. I'm Mary Haddix, 201 East Bridge Street, Granbury. And I am a member of the Historic Preservation Commission here. I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. But I will tell you that the commission did vote unanimously not to allow the historic marker to be removed. Like Mary said, 50 years ago, we had Mary Lou and Janine and Joe Nutt and my former deceased husband, Tom Ward, with a vision to preserve the buildings around the square of Granbury. And I can tell you that the building that we had, which was 132 North Houston, but now I think it's 132 or 123. They changed it when they did the 9/11, but it's the building on the square catty-corner to First National Bank. And I can tell you that when that building was purchased, the roof was falling in on it too. And the St. Helen building and all of the others back in the days when we were younger, those buildings were all falling apart. In fact, the square was practically boarded up, and there was no reason to come downtown to the square because there wasn't anything to do. Well, their vision is a result of what we have now, and that first started with the renovation of that opera house, which was a complete and total ruin, a disaster, and now it's a jewel of Granbury. If we continue removing these markers, the marker goes first and then the building. And no one comes here to see a high-rise. They can go to Dallas if they want to see a high-rise, but they come here to see history. And this building is historic in nature. It's 50 years old. Many people that are here that got here before you did were born there. And their children were born there. They worked there. It's part of their life and part of our heritage. And I wouldn't want my name associated with being a vote that allowed the destruction of one of these historic jewels of Granbury. And I hope that you are in the same category. I will appeal to your Texas pride here to keep this building because it is important and we cannot replace it. I'd love to see it renovated. I know the city has owned it for 16 years and they haven't spent any money on it because they haven't done any renovation. But any of the historic buildings around town, if you don't spend $20,000 or $30,000 a year keeping it up, it's going to fall down and deteriorate like this building's doing. So I'd like to see us get behind this, and I don't want to see that logo change from Granbury where history lives to Granbury where history used to live. And I hope that you'll stick with us on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haddix. And our last speaker is Ms. Southern. Is she still here? She had to leave. Okay. All right. So then, questions, comments to staff?
I do.
Go ahead, Mr.
Kyra,
Hallman.
obviously, the city owns the property, and they're requesting the landmark to be removed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's obvious that the city has no intention to spend any money on this. I mean, I know we're speaking for other people, but there's obviously a reason they're wanting the landmark to be removed.
I can't speak to the spending money on the property. I don't know.
In terms of a complete remodel, I'm not just talking about fixing leaks or something of that nature.
Right.
Yeah. I think I can speak for most of the commission here. I've heard no information come down the pike of their intention to do anything with that building. So my question is, does that thing just sit there in perpetuity? I know someone said they knew people that wanted to donate, but you're talking probably $1 million, if not more. The amount of asbestos in that building, one moment, the amount of asbestos in that building is incredible. And I'm a commercial builder. I deal with asbestos all the time. True, if you don't touch asbestos, it's not dangerous. But the moment you touch it, it becomes friable. Then it's an airborne contaminant. And that place is probably eat up with airborne contaminants. I mean, because back in the late 40s after the war, they used that in the flooring, the walls, the stucco, the ceiling tile, the pipe insulation. I'm sure it's all over that building. So you're talking probably a cost to abate that building more than the building it's probably actually even worth, even if they sold it. So I just don't see, we're just spinning our wheels here if anybody has a plan to do anything. I mean, I love old buildings. I absolutely adore them. I have no intention of wanting to tear any old building down, but there sometimes comes a cost involved here that sometimes people don't want to pay. So that's what I have.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Erdman.
Is the city paying insurance on that right now?
I am not familiar with that, but I would guess that they
I
are
would
paying.
assume they would be.
I would think so.
And as my co-chair here has talked, I've built buildings and abated asbestos, and that is an issue. So the question here is, do we let it finally tear down and contaminate the neighborhood when it finally collapses, or do we make a motion on this? Or does somebody have an idea to come up with several $1 million?
So she has her hand up here.
So
Yeah.
my question
I'll recognize
is
you.
what the expense is to the city right now.
I don't have that information, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Altarelli, would you like to reapproach the podium?
To try to answer your question, when it was deemed eligible for the National Register, the city asked me to do that because that makes it eligible for grants if a nonprofit wants to restore it, and it also makes it eligible for tax incentive credits if a developer buys it. And there is someone considering purchase of it right now. And I'll just use this well, the state has a 25% tax credit for the money you put into the building. So I know $1 million's low, and you're right. If you put $1 million into it, the state's gonna turn around and pay you $250,000 in cash. If we could find a developer, or if this developer would do it, it could, look at all these people who want to have unhosted B&Bs. It would make a wonderful boutique hotel. Wonderful. 1950s boutique hotel. But the city never pursued any of those things. The school district is partnering with Forward Training Center to use Granbury Elementary School and keep it maintained, a nonprofit. The city could do that and apply for grants. There's all kinds of stuff that could be done if you'll give it a chance. I know there was some talk with some nonprofit groups, but I just think a developer could do wonderful things to that building and help save our history. If you tear it down,
Go ahead.
If you tear it down, the city still has to spend the money to abate the asbestos. As you pointed out, if it deteriorates and collapses, it'll be released. Well, if it's torn down, it'll be released too. So.
Yeah, that's true, but there are two different types of abatement when you tear a building down compared to abate
Yeah,
it
I
to
understand.
remodel.
Yeah,
And the
I
remodel
understand.
abatement is way more expensive than the
Yeah.
tear down abatement.
Well, and when you said that it's worth more money, the land is, or it would cost more to restore it than the land is worth. We're talking about our community's history, and that's what I'm trying to appeal to you. That's what brought us all where we are now. Can we have some vision and some passion for what we are, please? Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Grace?
Question for staff. I see here that the applicant is the city of Granbury, but it's interesting, it's the applicant, it's actually the Granbury Historic Properties Corporation is the owner. Who is that?
That's the city.
And who is the president of that corporation?
I'm not sure that the title would be president, but the city manager.
It's the city manager.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
I'd like to pose, she said that she was asked, or I don't know if you were paid or just volunteered to work for the city, to see if it was eligible for the National Historical Registry, and that it made it then eligible for grants. Why the city then did not pull this from the agenda? If it was going to be eligible for 25% and grants and that, obviously the city is not showing any interest in that because they're allowing this to go forward on the agenda. So
Well,
just made it more of a
we are
statement.
kicking it down the road here.
So,
It's going to council regardless.
yeah, well, I know that.
Any other comments? Questions? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on the request for removal of the local landmark designation.
I'm going to make approval to remove it.
I have a motion to remove the local landmark. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Hayes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Who are the nays? Can you raise your hands for Bridget, please? Okay. The vote is 3-4, 4 against, though the motion to remove the landmark has failed. Kira, do we move forward to the next one, or is there something else that needs to be done on that? 3-4, 4 against. Okay. So we move on? Done with that? Okay. Right. Yes. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is D13. Request of the City of Granbury to amend select sections of the City of Granbury zoning ordinance pertaining to the addition of short-term rentals. Amendments proposed are to Section 4.1.A, uses permitted by district, Section 4.2, supplemental standards for land uses, Section 11.2.D, parking table, and Sections 12.3, land use definitions. Kira? Oh, man.
Thank you. So the last time we were here on this topic was May 9th, during which the text amendment draft was presented and staff proposed a continuance. The item was continued. The objective was being to hold a community meeting to obtain input on that proposal. And the report now comes before you with the proposal. We have made some amendments to the project, and I'll go over the background and then get into the actual proposal. So earlier this year, staff was directed to prepare an amendment for bed and breakfast ordinance requirements due to the influx of short-term rentals occurring within the residential neighborhoods. So we've studied this, and again, we've had some community input. I'm going to try to shorten up some of my statements here and go over the actual proposal in more detail. So the zoning ordinance is a dynamic document that can be amended and implements the vision of the 2016 Comprehensive Plan. The Comprehensive Plan identifies both the downtown core as well as the historic districts as appropriate areas for bed and breakfast uses. You'll see later in this proposal that we are recommending districts of the historic HPO and the historic HCO districts as appropriate for bed and breakfast use. Bed and breakfast now is hosted or unhosted. At this hearing tonight, we heard quite a bit about it. Hosted, mostly unhosted bed and breakfast. They provide for transient lodging for compensation for length of stay not to exceed between 14 and 28 days. In the zoning district, they can be a non-residential by right, that is permitted. They don't need to come into a public hearing. And in residential districts, upon the issuance of a SUP, that is with a public hearing. Now, the data that we have here, we did not update this data since the May 9th meeting. The reason being is this data can change every day. And we have a set of staff here in the city that monitors these, and every day they can count up. They're responsible for the hotel tax, which is administered to bed and breakfast. The bed and breakfast and the short-term rental is a term that's used interchangeably. But as of the May 9th, these are the locations. As you can see, primarily these locations are in the downtown historic districts areas, and there's another map that shows that. The number of bed and breakfasts has increased substantially in the last 2 years, and that's the chart that overlays the map. So you can see those bars there to the right representing the last couple of years. And this data is just through 2021. So we researched comparable cities, 8 regional municipalities, to see what are they doing. There's a varied regulatory approach. There doesn't seem to be a standard. Cities are unique and address the concerns of their community through the zoning ordinance. We were waiting for the Arlington case, which became a court case outcome of regulating short-term rentals, and the touchstone of current litigation as to whether these uses can be limited to geographic areas. They can be. The case was decided that way in favor of the city of Arlington, that geographic area regulation is allowed. So this slide just shows some of the standards that these uses can be regulated with: local contacts, non-transferable permits, occupancy limits, assembly limits, permits required for each unit, restricted to hosted only in certain areas, and other requirements. The current case law, the courts favor regulation of short-term rentals over an outright ban. So regulatory is preferred rather than banning. Now to the concept. The draft that we have before you, we gave consideration, there was input regarding whether or not to carry forward the bed and breakfast term. Some of you may have experienced zoning ordinances or life experiences where many years ago bed and breakfasts hosted were very common. And my experience with zoning ordinances was that those were regulated through specific use permits. So what we have today is a growth out of that. With the advent of the internet and hosted sites for short-term rentals on the internet, the term short-term rental has become more common. So in recognition of the hosted bed and breakfast, we'd like to retain that title. It makes sense, at least to staff, that that's more traditional, where the host lives in their own home, and that they have guests come in who are their bed and breakfast guests. And usually that is provided with meal service and is more what I would characterize as a family environment, as compared to what we are proposing to title as short-term rentals, residential, unhosted, and short-term rental commercial. So those are the titles we're proposing in this draft. We're proposing to refine the definitions. Only the principal building is the location of the bed and breakfast, and we heard tonight that there's some concern what's an accessory dwelling unit and how can that be used. So the principal building, that being the main house, the primary house on the lot, is the location of bed and breakfast, hosted or short-term rental, unhosted. So that's the residential districts, right? Accessory buildings already are not allowed, as recently stated. And retain the language rented for compensation. That's a key component of how the use functions. And retain the term of stay at 30 consecutive days. Now, we did change that timing up. It was 14 to 28. 30 is the standard, and it relates back to multifamily, which your standard term of lease for that is more than 30 days, typical month time frame, right? So that distinguishes a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental from a multifamily unit or some other rental type. Definition of bedroom, this one really was very challenging. You would notice in the draft that we had proposed the standard definition of the International Residential Code. We went back after we published and we studied that. The International Code basically says if you've got a 70 square foot room with a window exit, that's our code that we use, that's your bedroom. It has to have an exit and it has to have 70 square feet. There's a little bit more to that, but that's a summary. So we looked and we perused the state law. And there's a property chapter in the state law. It deals with leasing. So we're proposing that the definition of the bedroom be an area of a dwelling intended for sleeping quarters, and the term does not include kitchen, dining room, bathroom, living room, utility room, or closet or storage area of a dwelling. So likely in implementation of this by policy, we would say, as an example, what's a living room? Well, it's a room where people entertain others. It's got your couch, it's got your TV, that kind of a space. I'm sure some of those words could be debated, but we feel that this is a better definition as compared to something else. But again, it's a proposal, and it's for your consideration. Going further along, moving regulatory language out of definitions. The reason for this is in a zoning ordinance, definitions should define or tell what something is. Definitions should not regulate. So we're moving the regulations into the standard section for each of these uses. The provision of greater clarity of supplemental standards for each class of short-term rental. Creating a separate section, number 7. That's a new section. It currently stands blank in the ordinance, so it might seem odd. Why are you adding a number 7 when there's 20 some odd special standards? It's because that one has the space for this use, so we're putting it in there. Correct the numbering for bed and breakfast, just some cleanup work there. Correct the numbering for short-term residents. And add a floor plan requirement to the standards so that we know what we're looking at. I think that will clear up a lot of the questions we have. We'll be able to relate that floor plan back to the parking required, some of the activities and operational characteristics of a bed and breakfast or short-term rental. Make clear that hosted bed and breakfast is occupied as a permanent residence by the owner, and we're adding or owner's agent. So if they have an agent and they desire not to live there, then the occupancy they would need to very clearly show us their agent. And realign parking for clarity. So parking, well, that's a little hard to read. Just a second here. I'm sorry, I should have made that much larger. Here we go. Just a second. So the existing bed and breakfast parking standard will be struck just because of the other changes. Logistically, we need to strike that. The bed and breakfast hosted is clarifying that there would be one space for each bedroom, and additional requirements, 2 spaces for the owner or the agent occupants, drawing back to that new definition. Short-term rental commercial, 1 space for each bedroom and 2 spaces if the site has on-site management. Short-term rental residential unhosted, 1 space for each bedroom and 2 spaces in conformance with section 11.2A4, and that specifies the occupancy standard. And then we kept the old draft, and that's why you see that struck in red. Red represents new language from the previous draft, or struck through red. Yes, ma'am.
Because it's going to be lengthy and trying to remember what you need to go back to. I'm not sure what the section 11.2.A.4 is you're referencing. If you could explain that a little bit better.
Right. Let me go to that section here just real quick. So that section is all required off-street parking for single-family types of residential zoning districts to be located behind the front building line and enclosed in a 2-car garage. And then there's an exception for historical districts, which allows it in the front.
So this is in addition to each one for each bedroom and unhosted?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
This is additional requirements in addition to the space for each bedroom and an unhosted?
Right, so you would have the 2 spaces plus the 1 space for each bedroom. Does that seem too much, perhaps?
It just seemed, yeah. I mean, if it's unhosted, then those host cars aren't there, so I can't figure out what the additional requirement is other than 1 space for each bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Me either.
Yeah, we changed it from none to the 2 spaces.
Maybe it's just me, but
Unless you're tandem parking in the parking lot or in the driveway and in the garage.
Kira, is the intention of this to have the guest parking outside of a garage but still require a garage requirement in case the house is ever converted back to residential?
this would take up a lot of green space.
That's not a bad suggestion, but that was not part of our debate as staff, no.
I'm inclined to go back to none.
Yeah, I mean, if you had this many, it would seem like you would lose a lot of green space, too. Wow, okay.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
second. I think, let's see if Angela has something that I'm overlooking.
Angela Durant, planning technician. Yes, so I think that was staff's concern, is that especially if you built a new construction in a residential district and you only went with the base parking for a unhosted, say they built a 1-bedroom smaller structure, if it was ever converted back to residential, it would not meet the base requirements. So you would be constructing, for all intents and purposes, a new construction building that was non-conforming.
But the
from
construction
beginning.
standards have nothing to do with if you're building it for a B&B. I mean, there's construction standards that specify if you have to have a garage and what size.
Correct.
I mean, there aren't construction standards if you happen to use it for this purpose. It's still the same construction standards, right? I mean, we have standards in the city now that have to have 2-car garages.
All single-family residential
Yeah, that's what I
requires.
thought.
Yeah, and that's what that 11.2A4 is referencing. So it's to verify that that captures that base requirement.
Yeah, but this makes it sound like it's required in addition to it.
Yeah, we
somehow.
struggled with how to capture that.
Somehow.
I read that as meaning that you need 4 parking spots.
Yes. Yeah, to me, the building code for the house is completely different animal than
If it's a
this.
2-bedroom.
Yeah, I would have a suggestion.
Okay.
That this could say something to the effect, under additional standards, if no bed and breakfast on the property, then the property must revert to its use
no guest
parking
present.
standard, something to that
That sounds
effect.
better. If no guests are present or something like that. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I would think by 9 o'clock you need to write some notes. We may all forget.
Setting a record.
Okay.
Oh, that was good input, thank you. Where were we at then? So that was the parking chart.
For unhosted, that's where you ended.
All right, okay. And then I was explaining in the draft, I should have mentioned this when I started, but in the draft, you'll note that there is red font and black font. And with the first draft, we had black and yellow indicating changes. With this draft, we have red font and red strike through front and to attempt to indicate changes. Okay, so evaluation and modification of parking, which we just went over. We are adding a separate ordinance. So this is the zoning ordinance, what we just went over. Then we're proposing a separate permit ordinance in addition to the zoning ordinance that would include permitting and enforcement, no rental less than 18 hours, trash placement to control and prevent trash from being out for long periods of time, local management within a 1-hour time frame from the site, expiration of a permit if it is not renewed, geographic area where the rental might be located in the historic preservation and historic compatibility districts in and near the downtown area. And this slide just shows currently operating short-term rentals and bed and breakfasts on the left with those blue and pink dots. There are a few, as I pointed out at our last hearing, that of these uses that fall outside of the historic districts. Staff is currently recommending in this draft the areas shown in the historic and districts map on the right, and that's through the supplemental standards statements, not as a separate map in the ordinance. If the planning and zoning desired to recommend that any of those sites outside of the historic districts should be included, staff would suggest that that be included in your motion as a recommendation to consider zoning to a historic district those properties. They may seem remote from the historic districts. Nonetheless, we've studied, for example, I believe it's either Pearl or Bridge Street. We've studied that and would be comfortable with that street from a staff perspective being assigned as a historic district. And then the one down by the 377, the sheriff's house, is already designated as historic. I'm not sure why that isn't, those aren't zoned already. Moving on then. So the concept includes the zoning ordinance amendment and 2 items that would be the purview of the city council. That is the permitting and enforcement additions and miscellaneous sections updates to update the terminology throughout the city code. And these are key considerations. I think I've gone over these fairly well. Again, the 3 documents. And staff is recommending approval with 1 modification to the published report, and that is the bedroom definition. I would also suggest that the commission consider that parking change that we just discussed also. So voting options that are listed are approve with modification. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
So the bedroom, does it need to have any kind of language that the residential code about the egress?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Yeah,
Does
earlier.
that definition have? No. However, the building code would still apply, and that would then require the egress as well as the 70 square feet and whatever other components.
So I just wanted to let the commission know too, we're talking about two things. One of them is there's still, and you may not realize this, or you did if you probably went through it all, maybe I didn't, but there are two things she's talking about. We're still going to have SUPs, which is confusing a little bit because we also have a new thing that's going to be an annual permit. They both have the word permit in them. So we're having an SUP, and the SUP is being proposed to run with the land, but it's not valid unless you have the annual permit.
Sure.
So you guys all understand that? Okay. So, good. I'm glad y'all are further ahead than me than I was on page 231 today. So, so that's where some of that comes from. So we have about 14 SUPs that don't have term limits. They're going to be just kind of sitting out there unless something happens with them that'll be kind of just on their own. Because according to the lawsuits and the recommendations from the municipal law firms is that we don't, those need to be grandfathered. The other ones will come up for renewal. And when they do, they'll have to also do the permitting, which is also all the stuff that we'll talk about, the bedrooms and the emergency contact and all the things that are listed in your packet that have to do with that you didn't put that up, but you said because that's city council. But a lot of that's pretty kind of pertinent to what people that came to the workshop might be interested in. I didn't know if you have that to put up, only because of consideration of the audience members. I think there's some things in there that that may answer some of their questions.
Sure. I could summarize it if you'd like me to. Just kind of walk through it a little bit.
I think maybe that would be a good to do before the speakers that signed up to speak. It may answer some of their questions or let them know a little bit about what they're thinking about.
Okay, so on the permit side of it, this would be housed in the business regulations chapter of the city code.
I'm sorry?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Well,
when speakers get up, is it 5 minute time or 3? That's what she was asking.
It's on the sign-up sheet. It says 2.
2 minutes?
Okay.
If the sign-up sheet is correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kara.
Thank you. I'll just kind of highlight some of the things. There's a purpose state section, just some of the regular sections that are in a typical code, applicability section, and definitions. So the definitions include an administrator, that who administers the code. A section of this deals with advertising the platforms where you would go to look for rentals. Is addressed in here, and it needs to be because in this permit section, there are certain things that deal with the platform, and advertises is one of those. Bedroom, we would use the same definition that we talked about this evening. Booking service, again, goes to the platform. That is the place where you go to rent. City hosting platform. Occupant, that's the individual or person living, sleeping, or possessing a building or portion thereof. Possessing means the person is not required to be paying rent, providing in-kind service, or named in any lease or other legal document to be considered an occupant. So that actually speaks to the person who's not the owner, but an occupant. The owner is a person, an agent, operator, and so on, who owns the property. The premises is the site, including the land, not just the building or the structure. Short-term rentals in the permit document would be the same as those proposed in the zoning ordinance. So that would be the bed and breakfast hosted, the short-term rental residential unhosted, and the short-term rental commercial. Then we get into the regulatory sections. First, on the non-permitted, and there's two types of permits. I think that's important to describe. There's the special use permit, which is zoning. That goes to the public hearing. And there's the permit, which is this document that I'm reading from, which would be Chapter 4 business section. That's a permit to hold so that you can operate your business, right? or operate your rental. So a permit is required, is what this says. Short-term rental permit is required. I'm sorry, I'm repeating, just getting lines across here. There would be a fee established in a master fee schedule. So presuming that this amendment is approved, then we would come at a future date with an amendment to the master fee schedule to set that fee. And that's usually done about this time of year, late in the fiscal year, right? The permit would expire and require a renewal every year. They would have to come in for a new permit. It's an annual permit. There would be an annual fee. If the application satisfies the conditions of the codes, then it would be approved. And an application for the permit would be approved by the building official or designee. In the event that a permit is not renewed or is relinquished, then the specific use permit issued would also become void. The application requirements are, so this is for the rental, the name of the person, that's the applicant and the owner, the contact information, as we've talked about the SUPs, you'd have contact for emergencies, a site plan of the premises, a floor plan of the premises, proof of insurance, the name and contact information of the property or homeowner association, if any, that covers the premises, a copy of the proposed host rules, and certifications deemed necessary to ensure compliance with this article. So that's a little bit of an open statement. They just need to make sure that there's compliance. An application for a renewal permit may be filed beginning 30 days prior to the expiration of the current permit. So there's a timing factor. A local responsible party is required and describes that the name and contact information be provided, and very specific to that person must be able to be present and shall be present within 1 hour of a call from the chief building official or designee. Proof of insurance is required. I think that kind of stands for itself on its own. Inspection is required. Hotel occupancy taxes are required. The short-term rental permit is not transferable. So if there's a new owner, the new owner would have to apply for this permit. That's unlike the specific special use permit. And then occupant restrictions, 2 persons per bedroom. Regardless of the number of bedrooms, cannot allow or permit the number of occupants to exceed the maximum occupancy. So that goes to the visitors. Like if you've got your bedrooms are full, but people commonly would have visitors come over, they can't exceed the occupancy standard of that building, and that's set by the building code. Maximum stay required, not less than 18 hours. Don't need to go into that, but that prevents nefarious activities, right? Trash pickup. So no receptacle, refuse bin, container, or bag shall be placed on the curbside earlier than 7 p.m. the evening prior to regular scheduled pickup, or on a day not scheduled for pickup by the city or its authorized solid waste transportation vendor. There's a penalty clause with the standard fine of no more than $2,000. That's our standard infraction fine, and that's administered through the court system. So that takes care of the permit piece, okay? Now I'll move on to the miscellaneous code sections. Is that all right, Ms. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. So this is a separate document in your staff report. And these are just updates to the titles of the use. So these changes are in the smoking code, the definitions section, prohibition of smoking in public places, exemption from prohibition. There's a rates section. This is from, I don't have a reference. Oh, it's for water meters. That's the rates. They have actually list this use. And another rate for residential service, and the previous one was for commercial rates for the water meters. So that's what we have in those other documents. Do you have any questions?
So from me listening to this, one bedroom, one parking spot, so thereby, by osmosis, they're limiting pretty much how much they can rent by parking. I mean, parking is pretty much going to be the limiting standard, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So a 5-bedroom house, though if it was residential, a single family lived there, that would typically have 2 parking places. It's not going to fly if it goes to Airbnb status because they're not going to be able to get probably 5 parking spaces out of it on a typical residential home.
Mr. Hellman, I understand where you're headed with that analysis. I would also add that it's dependent upon the size of the property.
Correct. Yeah, in case they could, if it's a large lot, they might be able to pour an additional pad and stuff. But the homes being built today, you're probably not going to get that. Maybe some of the older homes you might. But.
Right. And to that point, there is a standard that we were adding that would limit the paving for parking to only the parking that's required. No excessive paving for that purpose.
So do we have a limit on bedrooms then? I saw something on, I'm not sure where it ties into the permit versus the code. I saw something about 7. But I mean, I agree with him. It's going to be determined by parking.
So there's
right, but
there's different ones. So if we were to start with the short-term rental commercial is 7. Then the bed and breakfast hosted is 7, and the short-term rental residential unhosted is 3.
So where are you getting that? That's different than what we just talked about earlier, that was 2.
Right.
I don't
so-
see that in
so
our
the current-
packet
the
here,
current-
do I?
That's all right.
Do I see it?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
So the current definition of the residential, it's in the supplemental standards? Thank you, Angela. So it's in the supplemental standards currently.
Where's the 3 though?
Sorry, Angela, I'm not. Right. Right, the old one is in the definitions. Okay.
3.
Yeah, the old one is in the definitions for the bed and breakfast facility, unhosted residential is 2 bedrooms. Now, there's nothing, wrong if you folks, if you would like to propose that we change that to 2 bedrooms. It's entirely your decision.
No, I think if you have parking for 3, you should be able to utilize your 3 bedrooms. But I mean, you're pretty much limited by your parking.
Right, and at the workshop, we did have someone that was a hosted that actually has more rooms than 7, but the ordinance is limiting, that one being the Iron Horse Inn, that spoke, that said, I've got 8 bedrooms, but there's a limit of 7. So I'm not really sure those numbers, that 7 was set a while back. I mean, but there's those facilities like that he may actually have parking too and has the room. So I'm going to open the public hearing and hear from some of our members, if that's okay with you guys. And then, so our first speaker is Mr. Wayne Mills.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Mills. I live at 629 East Bridge Street. One of the things that I would ask as we're looking at this is the density standpoint for unhosted short-term rentals. As it currently stands, when we present an unhosted bed and breakfast, future to be a short-term rental, we include in there a nice map that shows us basically density, how many bed and breakfasts we have within 600 feet of the applicant residence. But we do nothing with that, and there's no guidance to us as to why we do that. And from some of us in our communities that feel as though we're losing full-time residents from our communities, I would ask that we could take a look at utilizing some density requirements to say within a certain square feet and whatever the city would come up with to say, or staff would come up with to say, we'll allow this many unhosted bed and breakfasts within this area, be it 600 feet, be it whatever it is. But I would ask for that to be a consideration as we move forward with this ordinance. I really appreciate all of the hard work and the effort that's gone into this. It's much improved and much clearer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We actually did have in our packet, if some of you realized it or saw it, the city of Austin, who has a 1,000-foot distance. If there's already a unhosted bed and breakfast, then they restrict it to 1,000 feet for where there could be another one. And they also look at a density percentage as part of a census number for that. And so I kind of, as a chairman, I don't know if I get to vote, but I do agree with Mr. Mills on those things or possibly things that could be looked at. And I think, I don't think those two things, well, I'm not going to swear. I'll have to ask Jeremy if they're being challenged in court or not right now. The second speaker we have tonight is Danny Dwight. Danny Dwight.
Good evening. My name is Danny Dwight. I live at 405 Counts Alley. I walked in here with 4 questions and 1 suggestion, and y'all have already answered 2 of my questions, so thank you very much. So we'll go a little shorter.
Oh, you got another one.
I'm part of this group of known offenders over here that shows up at every meeting having to do with short-term rentals. We do appreciate the work y'all have put into this. This was a hornet's nest y'all kicked over, and you have put yeoman's work into it, and I thank everybody on the city staff and on the board that has worked with this issue. I do have a couple of questions just for clarification for my own use and a suggestion possibly. The first question is, what is a principal building? I noticed in the definition for a short-term rental, they use that verbiage. And I guess the scenario that came to my mind that framed this question, if someone owns a piece of property and there are 2 buildings on that property, one building has 3 bedrooms and the bathrooms and the kitchen and everything, and a separate building on the same property has parking spaces, parking garage slots, and at least 1 or 2 bedrooms with bathrooms and kitchen facilities, which is the principal building? Is it the whole thing as one big unit? Is it one building? Can each building be a principal building? What constitutes the definition of a principal building? Can you rent more than one property on one building on the one? Can't even talk. Can you rent more than one building on the same property?
So I'm going to stop the timer because I'm going to tell. I asked Kira today about like someone who has a guest house, and she explained to me that in the city ordinance, is that correct? Or maybe you should just say it, Kira, probably be much cleaner. It had to be a relative, right?
Pardon me?
Didn't it have to be a relative?
So we were talking about the accessory dwelling unit?
Yeah, accessory buildings. If somebody had an accessory building, what kept them from also using that for the Airbnb or the short-term rental?
Right. So if it's an accessory dwelling unit, then the relative of the owner living in the house, which would be the primary building, that building is accessory to the primary building, which is the house, and it cannot be used as a bed and breakfast. Does that answer your question? Or what a primary building is? Is the,
Think so.
the single-family house that's constructed on the lot.
Okay.
It's not a garage. It's not an accessory building like a shed where you store your tools, right? And it's not.
Well,
an
I'm talking
accessory.
like a garage apartment,
Okay.
separate from
Right.
the main house.
So the ordinance actually does have the term garage apartment in it. And that's analogous to a accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you. That'd be correct. Yeah.
Second question concerns parking. When there's discussed parking in here, they talk about screening the parking from adjacent residences. What does that entail? Do you have to put it in a garage, or do you have to put fencing up to keep it out of sight of the neighbors? Are the people that rent these places allowed to park on the street? What exactly does the screening mean?
Kira?
Sure. So there are a few questions in that one. So screening of parking by policy has been implemented that the headlights of the parked cars have to be screened, say, with a fence or something that obstructs the headlights from shining onto the residential properties.
Okay.
Right? Can they park on the street? If the street is signed no parking, they cannot park on the street where the sign says no parking.
Okay.
If there's no sign that says prohibits parking, you can park on the street.
Okay.
We have an ordinance, however, that does require on-site parking.
Okay, all right, good deal. My suggestion is, I wish y'all would, let me start a different way. If I have a business with any business in this town and I have a problem with that business, I can go in and I can find somebody to talk to try to get my problem resolved anytime that business is open. From my perspective, living in a neighborhood, if there's an Airbnb or a bed and breakfast close by, if there are people staying there, it's open. Who do I contact about a problem there? I'd be surprised if the city wants us calling the city every time there's any kind of an issue about parking or traffic or whatever it is. Can there be a list created with the name, address, and phone numbers for the people that own the B&Bs and the bed and breakfast? That would give us some recourse to correcting things without going through the city and creating more problems for everybody. So.
Kyra, I actually thought of this exact question he just brought up, and I think that I'd make a suggestion that the city start like an STR hotline. That's just a special number that goes into either code enforcement or something. That would be passed out. I mean, we've got 75 STRs now. Well, that's outside of me. They have to after our number or what. But the city's going to enforce this. They got to figure it out, not me. I'm just a taxpayer like you.
If it's not there, I would recommend putting something like that in place where the people that live next to all these B&Bs have recourse without having to go through the city to get it done.
Madam Chair?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
I have
Irvin.
a question for staff. Maybe this is too simple, but could there be a requirement where they have to put a sign that says, in case of emergency, please contact?
We've done some research on other cities, and there seems to me there were some cities that have signs or some like, I'll call them postal boxes, but boxes at the front of the property that have emergency information geared more towards emergency services, that would have the emergency contact and that kind of information. I don't think there's anything wrong with that we could look into this. I would suggest that you direct staff to do that as part of your motion if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm just saying have another mailbox that says in case of complaints or something, there's a number in there, and hey, have them call it and hash it out.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dwight.
Thank you all very much.
Next speaker is Lou James.
Thank you. I'm Lou James, 407 Counts Alley, and I appreciate all the work. Reading this, it's obvious lots of work has been done by lots of people. I support what Wayne and Danny said already. Lots to unpack. Yes, this will allow 3 bedrooms instead of 2, so this will it not increase the number of unhosted residential short-term rentals? Because you're going to allow 3 bedrooms, and now you only allow 2. So we can anticipate there will be more. We don't know how many more. Parking, yes, I read the regulation. Basically, all unhosted short-term rentals have to have a garage, a 2-car garage. That's how it reads. If it's 3 bedrooms, it has to have a 2-car garage and another spot. That can be waived by the, I just lost it here, Special Exceptions Zoning Board of Adjustment. So for a bed and breakfast, now, if I'm wrong, tell me, but I read the regulation. It runs you around the rabbit hole a few times and takes you up to special exceptions. But yes, it says 2 extra spaces, and when you read the 11 point whatever, it says that's in a 2-car garage. So as this is written, all short-term rentals in residential, unhosted residential have to have a 2-car garage, and if there's a 3rd bedroom, another spot. And that can be weighed by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. That's how it reads. Double check me.
What section are you reading from?
Okay, could you put the parking back up? It's 11 point something something. Okay, can you look that up and read it about the 2-car garage?
I can share that section with you. It's 11.2A4.
And it states?
Sure.
It's a standard residential parking rule.
So what it states is off-street parking general provisions. All required off-street parking spaces in the single-family patio home and townhome residential zoning districts, and then it gives the abbreviations, shall be located behind the front building line and shall be enclosed in a 2-car garage except with the approval of a special exception as set forth in Section 2.1F, Board of Adjustment Special Exceptions. So that's the reference there.
Jeez, we have tons of old houses that don't even
Old houses
have
don't have
garage.
garages, a lot of them.
Right. And so it goes on. Right? Historically significant dwellings as defined in Article 12 definitions that are moved from one location to another location within the city limits are exempt from this requirement. All duplex lots MD-1 shall provide 1 parking space enclosed in a garage except with the approval of a special exception as set forth in Section 2.1F, Board of Adjustment Special Exceptions. That's the end of that section.
Well, let's just say it needs some clarification. The local responsible party, I would like to see that information on the website. That's very simple, and that doesn't have to be part of the ordinance. I think the city manager could do that administratively. Just the website lists every short-term rental in the city, the local point of contact with how we get in touch with them 24 hours a day, and the date that the permit was issued and the date it needs to be renewed. It's all public information. It should be on the website so we can look it up. And that way we can, if there's noise, we can call that person and not even involve the police or the city. We can handle it neighbor to neighbor. Garage apartment. Garage apartments are prohibited in all residential neighborhoods, except I think R12, whatever the very biggest one is. No garage apartments in any residential neighborhood, period. You can't even give them an SUP. Look it up, they're prohibited. Okay, so we can't have anything. We can't even have a garage apartment. And the only other thing, which is not addressed, it's the signage in a residential neighborhood, and that's the current regulation, which will stay the same. 18 square feet. A standard real estate for sale sign is 3 square feet, so that's 6 of those. That's what you can have in a residential neighborhood. That's what you can put in the front yard next to my house if the house next to me is a short-term rental. 18 square feet, I think that's a bit much. Miss Huawei, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Miss Huawei, you know, that falls on you. You have to approve that sign. So I think you should make her job a little easier, because if there's an 18-foot sign on the house next door that she approved, she's going to hear from me.
Would that not have to be a sign permit also issued? Any sign has to have a permit.
Yeah,
it goes through a different process too, so.
Well, it specifies that the community development approves the sign in this case.
These signs come in through, to our office through the building department. Yeah.
And y'all issued the sign permit for that?
Um,
I bet that was put in there
we-
because you see a lot of commercial where they put up a large, sign on a commercial
Right.
piece of property.
So we review all sign permits, and if it doesn't meet the sign code, we would address that as a comment of how they need to make modifications. Permits are formally issued by the building inspections department, but we do review and issue the approvals and denials.
The only other suggestion I have is perhaps since the permit, the specific use permit is a permit, perhaps you could call the other a license, like a business license. So, just a thought. Thank you. And again, I see all the work everybody did, and it's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. The next speaker is Amy Dwight. There's only one more after this.
I don't even know what to make a suggestion and make a motion.
My name is Amy Dwight. I live at 405 Counts Alley. Again, I want to thank everybody who's worked on this because obviously it's a hornet's nest and a ton of work has already been done. In the purpose statement, section 4.16.001, it says the intent of this chapter is to preserve the neighborhood character of residential subdivisions within the city of Granbury and to minimize adverse impacts to the housing supply caused by the conversion of residential units to tourist or transient use. Like Wayne, I'm concerned about density. I wonder, with no attempt to regulate density or number of short-term rentals, how exactly housing supply and neighborhood character are going to be maintained. As full-time residents who live in a single-family home in a residential neighborhood in the historic district of downtown Granbury, one of our biggest objections to the proliferation of short-term rentals is that houses stand empty 80 to 90% of the time. How do you have a neighborhood with no neighbors? Now, I know that doesn't seem to bother a lot of people, but remember, we're not just a tourist town, we're also a retirement community. Those of us who are retired are home more. Our neighbors matter more, and those of us who are retired do a lot in the community as well. We do a lot without being paid. I just would also like to bring up the fact that, again, we're a tourist town. A diversified economy is generally also considered to be a really good thing, so let's not put all of our eggs in that one tourism basket. Remember, things happen, and they've happened recently, that decimate the hospitality industry. What happens with all the short-term rentals if that happens? So again, I'm not trying to be a fear-mongerer, I'm just asking for balance. Let's just consider all of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. And our final speaker that signed up is Kelly Van Buren.
Goodness, this is a late evening, and I'm speaking on behalf of those that own short-term rentals, and I really want to thank you all for being fair-minded in this because it is a difficult thing. It's good for the city, but there are some challenges. I wanted a few points here regarding the application. I would really, it's a very, very competitive environment, even though there's 78 in Granbury. It's a very, very competitive environment, and those that are not managing their property correctly and aren't listening to citizens that are having issues, they're not going to survive. And so what I'm proposing, you're wanting to do a renewal of the application with several different elements to it annually. What I would request is that you would push that out a year or like maybe 2 or 3 years, so that that's done every 2 or 3 years and not having to do it every single year. And I would also propose that let it be transferable. And then on parking, I just looked at Fredericksburg's. They had several ordinances that were changed in April of this year, and we go there once a quarter, and it's a great study of how they do things, and they have a very, very successful Airbnb. There are some folks that don't like it, and that's going to be that way. But their parking situation is you have 2 primary parking spaces per structure, with 1 additional parking space on the street, provided that they have 22 feet of frontage. And that's their definition of parking for an unhosted Airbnb or short-term rental. But to now, if you have 3 bedrooms, now you have to have 3 parking spaces, or 4 bedrooms, 4 parking spaces. That seems a little much. And I think the comments here that we're at, there's been very, very few complaints from folks that have these. I know I wouldn't tolerate that at all in ours at all. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Questions or comments? All right, then I don't have the stamina. I'll close the public hearing. So, we have before you the request to amend 4 of the sections of the zoning ordinance. So, discussion or where you want to go with this? Who's turning on? Mr. Erdman or Mr. Hallman?
Motion to approve.
As stands?
As stands.
With the modification of the definition of bedroom and the parking modification we talked about earlier.
I'll go with that.
What was the parking modification?
I second.
That's taken out the bedroom is that right?
It's putting in the new definition of the bedroom that's up on the screen.
Okay.
And then on the parking was just leaving it as 1 per bedroom.
I'll amend
Correct?
my.
Yeah, I'm hesitant only because of the definition that it needed a garage. I think that's going to be a disastrous to a lot of these older homes.
Yes, Kira?
Unhosted was 1 per each bedroom. Okay, that was the requirement column. And then additional requirement was if no guests are present, then parking is required per the main use.
Everybody understand what she's saying there?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So that's saying if they're not using it as a Airbnb, then it resorts to a regular home.
Single-family dwelling parking, right?
Right.
Presuming it's that use, yes.
I'll amend my motion.
But that's something that we can request staff to look at in a separate, maybe, in part of the motion.
Yes.
Let's see, I'm not sure how to put that, but Mr. Erdman, would you be entertain in your motion that you have forward so far also to direct staff to look at some density parameters and come back to us?
Yes.
Okay, everybody got that? Everybody following what's going on? Okay.
I'm tired.
So we have a motion by Mr. Erdman. Do we have a second to what they just said?
I second it.
Second for Mr. Grace. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are we all straight, or we need to get anything straighter with straight? I think that's not even a word.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. I would seek clarification on the return. I heard that it was a motion to approve.
Okay.
With
and,
modification.
And return.
Okay,
In
so.
whole, that's my concern is what are we?
Okay, I think
approving and
what,
taking
then
forward?
I messed that one up, so we'll, Mr. Erdman, could I get you to, I'm not sure if we withdraw that or not. Probably withdraw that motion, and is that the record?
I can withdraw that motion.
Okay.
I will withdraw the motion that I made.
Okay, so because of the density. We just want to direct you that separate. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Sorry, I should have muddied that up. So Mr. Erdman's original motion was to approve as presented with the modification of the definition of the bedroom and the modification stated by Kira to the additional parking requirements for the short-term rental unhosted. Is that correct? Sorry, wow, that seems loud. Anyway, so is that still your motion?
Yes,
Can that
ma'am.
be your motion? Okay, that's going to be Mr. Erdman's motion, and we have a second by Mr. Grace. Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So I can't make a motion, but I would like to, can I direct staff or ask direct, or I need to have someone else do it? I want to direct staff to look at density parameters to possibly put into the short-term rental ordinances.
I think that it would be best, we're still on this item, right? And I think it would be best to have a motion since we're in a public hearing.
Okay. All right. So speaking of which, I'm not sure we ever closed the public hearing, but we'll close it now. It's a motion, is anybody else inclined to do that motion? I don't know. I'm not sure as chair as I can actually make motions.
I would like to make a motion that staff look at density.
Okay, we have a motion for staff to look at density or density parameters. We have a second by Mr. Hallman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. So I believe we are ready to move into, and there's that poor guy at the back. I know you're back there. E1, consider the request of, I can't even read it anymore, Shikra LP to final plat a 24.949 acre tract of the John Chenoweth Survey, abstract number 118, S lots 44 through 55, and private drainage easement 5F, block 6, lots 21 through 44, and Greenbelt area 3, block 7, lots 13 through 24, and private park 5A-3, block 9, and lots 1 through 30. Block 10 of the Abe's Landing Phase 5A3 and 5A4 addition. The property is located west of Weatherford Highway and north of Hunter Park. Kira?
Sure. So
Kira? Sorry, Kira, I can't even say your name anymore.
You're
Sorry.
okay.
Kira.
Not to be concerned. Sorry. So the site is shown on the map. It's outlined in teal. It's about 25 acres in size. Currently is interim holding. As you heard of, this project has a zoning case that you recommended for approval earlier on our agenda for PDR7. The preliminary plat had gone through its courses, and this changes that a little bit. It increases the residential lots while decreasing commercial lots and modifying the street layout. The streets connect to the subdivision there to the north, and then we'll connect to a main street connecting onto Weatherford Highway to the south. This drawing is the plat, first page of the final plat, and this drawing is the second page of the final plat. Close up, there would be a rock fence along Weatherford Highway to match the existing that's along the overall subdivision of the property. And staff recommends approval of the final plat. It meets the standards, and there is a accompanying FIA that will move forward with the plat to City Council. These are your voting options. Thank you. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Applicant, would you like to, or representative, please? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Chad Wallace with Brown Engineering, representing the applicant. I will not mention bed and breakfast to you guys. Yeah, final plat.
And surely your deed restrictions, you're restricting short-term rentals, right?
Yeah, final plat for the zoning that you put in place earlier. Construction plans approved through the Public Works in accordance with the city regulations, and a FIA with the bond that was received by the city today to cover the infrastructure.
Sounds good. Any questions or comments for staff or the applicant? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Yeah. Have a motion to approve with conditions? correct? We have some conditions, correct?
Okay, with
You're-
conditions.
I'm not looking at
No,
my,
there are no conditions. It's just
Oh.
the plat.
no, not, okay, sorry, you had it up there. I'm not on that page. So just a recommendation for approval. Motion by Mr. Erdman. Do I have a second? Did I have a second? Somebody did it? Okay. Randy, you got a second?
No, I made the motion.
Randy made them, we have a motion by Mr. Moore to approve the plat as presented. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Second by Mr. Erdman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is, no further business. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.